All right, welcome everyone to the executive. All right, thank you, Marisa. Welcome everyone to the executive committee of Manhattan Community Board at 5. I'm going to call this meeting to order. And so on our agenda, we have 8 items plus new business. So we're going to get started because many of us were here last night. And so I think we all want to move efficiently through this. So I think we're going to start. Thank you. I know that Renee has a hard out at 7. We're with the BEX resolutions today. This cycle at the BEX meeting, they unfortunately did not have a quorum. And so we are now going to vote as the executive committee on those items. So Renee, I will turn it over to you.
Okay. Do you want the full report or just those 2 resolutions, Brad?
You can do the full report just because I know that you have to leave, and I don't think we only have one more, right?
Yeah. So just briefly, we had a presentation from the Independent Budget Office. They provided an overview primarily to new members about how the budget works, what the budget cycle looks like, generally who does what, when. They usually come every time this year. We then had 2 community groups to discuss their issues of concern for budget purposes. We had David Akiles of the West 50s Neighborhood Association. He spoke about things that his association were concerned with. They include enforcement of laws around biking and bike lanes. They're asking for an education mandate on biking and for a joint task force of the Police Department and Department of Transportation to undertake enforcement. They're also asking that the owners of City Bike be required to fund education around city biking to help educate riders. Other issues of concern were illegal vending, illegal smoke shops in City of Yes, which they were opposed to because it does not mandate affordable housing. They believe it's a giveaway to real estate developers. By the way, we are getting these community groups in for purposes of the budget requests that are coming up at the end of the summer. We then heard from John Mudd, Luana Green of Midtown South Community Council. They spoke about the community's objection to the City of Yes again, because of its failure to mandate affordability and allows developers to pick and choose. They spoke about the AMI. They spoke about demolition of smaller buildings, which are currently affordable. They also spoke about food insecurity and about an urban farm they've built, which is something that BEX is going to look at for budget requests. And then finally, they spoke about the drop-in center, Main Chance, which is our first resolution. If you guys recall, Councilmember Brewer mentioned this twice at different full board meetings. The center's not in our districts. It's located on East 32nd Street, just like a stone's throw beyond our district on the east side. It's been there for a number of years. If you read the reso, DHS is discontinuing its funding and says it's going to be absorbed by other centers. We have Paul's Place, which I don't know if you guys know that. It's on 14th Street on the corner. I'm going to lie to you. It's either 6th or 7th Avenue. And then we also have the one in Penn Station and the one that's being opened on 9th Avenue, but like really nowhere on the east side. We've always championed these types of support centers for the unhoused. What it is, it's a drop-in center. They provide meals, they provide respite, they provide showers, they provide grocery drops once a month where people line up and they can get extra groceries. We had a unanimous resolution of all 13 members present asking DHS to restore its funding and to keep them in place. Do you want to?
Yeah, let's do one at a time. Are there any questions to the resolution?
Brett, I just want to say, looking at the voting now, it seems we did have a quorum. It didn't seem on the day, but we had an updated voting sheet. So, in fact, it looks like we had quorum for this. It was a unanimous vote.
Of in-person members?
Julie, correct me if I'm wrong.
There was, I think, only 6 people in person, right?
Okay, so no. All right, I lie.
Okay, so are there questions to the resolution? Samir?
So I was looking at the schedule for all of our meetings, and for the BEX meeting, this was not on the agenda. I know there was something around Midtown South Community Council presenting, but like, you know, if you're a member of the public, you wouldn't have known that you should go and comment on Main Chance if this was coming up. So I'm curious, like, if, you know, this has been in the news for months. So like, I guess why was this not made like a proper, like noticed item where members of the public could come and speak? Because like, I don't know if people want this, you know, I want it, but like, I don't know if members of the public like want Main Chance to stay, or they would rather have it go, the people go to other places. Like, I just, like, if you're a member of the public, I don't know how you're supposed to know that come and comment on this.
Sure. So I had reached out to Main Chance the first time Councilmember Brewer brought this up, and then I was working with CB6 because technically it's in their district. And I really wasn't able to get traction or get Ming Chance in to have a presentation about this issue. This came up organically as a request, and the committee itself, Bex is kind of weird like that. Sometimes we decide we don't have applications in the same way. I understand the noticing issue. But in fact, my understanding is what we need to do is notice the meeting, not necessarily the specific agenda items. So while I appreciate your concern, I think that CB5 has been on record again and again and again, both requesting budget items on this issue, as well as supporting it in all different sorts of ways throughout the committee over the years.
I guess potentially also to allay those concerns. It was on the agenda for tonight. We don't have to speak about it. So hopefully that means that there's nobody who is against this.
When was the exact agenda update?
It was last week as part of the memo or the e-blast.
Yeah.
Any other questions to the? Any comments? All right, let's take this to a vote.
Sorry, there are members of the public. Are we,
Oh, sorry, you're right.
there are members. of the
Apologies. Any members of the public who wish to speak? Please use the raise hand function. Seeing none, now it's safe for vote. Thank you.
Okay, Julie,
Yes.
Ankur,
Yes.
Catherine,
Yes.
Aaron,
Yes.
Kevin, you are not here. Nancy is not here. Tristan,
Yes.
Mark is not here. Libby,
Yes.
Renee,
Yes.
Samir.
Yes.
Yeah.
I am a yes. Todd,
Yes.
David.
Yep.
Janice,
Yes.
passes 12-0-1.
Next item, Renee.
Okay, great. So we had Len Silverman of District 2, the CEC, which is the Community and Citywide Education Council. He's the head of that. He spoke to us about a bunch of their initiatives and what parents are focused on, which is primarily the geographic preference. You guys are going to remember we had hundreds of letters on this. There's also some other issues, testing and Narcan in schools that they're working on. But two members of exec very specifically asked Bex to discuss the CEC Resolution 248, which calls for re-examine of the rules governing participation in PSAL by trans children. I want to be super clear. This resolution is moot. The chancellor said he's not acting on it. But in order to put this to bed, the committee decided to write a letter indicating our disagreement with the substance of that resolution. We did not have a quorum, and the vote was 6 in favor and 3 abstained, with apparently another person is also voting now to abstain. I think their vote was overlooked. You can look at the substance of the letter. That's it. Just to elaborate, we received, everybody has heard about this issue a lot. It was brought up in one of our full board meetings. We heard about it. We heard from activists. We heard from parents. In this go round, we received letters from parents who were supportive of the resolution. We heard from people on the CEC who were appointed by the Manhattan Borough President who were not supportive of the issue. So we really heard the gamut, and this is where we came out. We'd like to put it to bed. What we'd really like to do is, want to focus on actionable and current issues to effectively use our time. So we want to just get this done.
Any questions of the resolution? Samir, then Tristan.
Yeah, maybe this is something we can talk about later too, but I was curious why this is written as a letter versus a resolution, and like when Bex decides to do one versus the other.
That was the request of the committee. And in fact, I actually sent something to Brad today asking for clarification around that.
We're going to discuss later, but yes. Tristan.
I think the letter is well written and it captures the sense of the committee, but it mentions a couple of pieces on like our internal operations. Like it says like 2 members of our board asked the next committee to focus on the resolution. And like, I'm just wondering, do you think like, do we typically talk about that? Maybe it's more of a comment, but is there a reason why we specifically talked about like our internal processes and how it came up as an agenda item versus just talking about the final output of the committee?
I think it's because it's moot. Like the issue, we are weighing in on something that is like, it's not actionable, it's not impactful. It's done, Tristan. Like this has no impact. I'm sending this.
I'm not arguing with that.
Yeah. It's after the fact. Like it's not, the train has left the station kind of.
Okay.
You would delete the reference to.
I'm happy if you want to delete that reference, that's absolutely fine. I was just giving a rationale as to why we've gone back to
Got it.
this issue again.
Thank you.
Charles,
Hi, thanks, Chair. Couple of things. Unfortunately, I wasn't given a copy of the letter to review. I was just wondering if the letter is complete or if Bex committee members can add anything to it, or would that be more of a friendly amendment nearer the time? As a person who originally in the meeting suggested a letter of support, I just want to make sure that I wasn't out of order in any way, that you know, with us being a independent, neutral community board, the fact that the resolution was already muted by the Chancellor, by going ahead with a letter of support, which at the time I thought was a good idea. I'm just wondering if that is more now would be seen by the public as a political stance than seeking any remedy. And in fact, the members of the public who were present didn't even ask for or even suggest for a resolution or a letter. So, and going back to just one last thing, going back to the reference about I think if I got this right, about not having a reference to two executive members, you know, suggesting the idea of looking at this at the Bex committee. I think that's unfortunate, because I think, you know, for transparency, I think it's nice for the public to know how this all got to the Bex committee in the first place. And I think it would be a good idea to keep that in, to show that we did try, in fact, to look at this issue, that we didn't brush it under the carpet kind of thing.
thank you, Charles. Any other questions? You're on.
Procedurally, so we are voting tonight sort of as Bex because they didn't have one.
Correct.
And this letter, I know we have an agenda item later about letters. This letter would be treated as sort of previous letters and we would not vote on it at full board. Is that correct?
We're going to vote on a full board as well,
I see.
similar to the letter. I choose as reference because I know it, the landmarks one that we did 2 months ago was a letter that we wrote as the committee, voted on the committee, and then voted on as a full board. So it'd be coming from Manhattan Community Board 5, not the Bex committee of Manhattan Community Board.
Okay, so that was my question, because the letter is currently written from Bex. So the language will change and it will be from Community Board 5.
That would be my, I mean, we can talk about it later, but that would be my understanding of how this would go. So I think that would be an amendment we would need to make to that letter.
Okay.
Would you consider that a friendly amendment, Renee?
Absolutely. I do want to say something. I abstained from this resolution. And I will explain my abstention. I think it's a moot point. I want to focus on things that are actionable and that are important to Bex and things that where we can be impactful. The fact that this makes absolutely, like, I don't even know where to send this. We can send this to the chancellor, but so I abstain, which is unusual for a chair. So I'm very happy for it to come from Bex. I mean, from the full board.
And when Bex spoke, you said there were how many in favor and how? 6 and 3, right?
It's a recommendation because they didn't form, but. I think we're still in questions. Or seems like none. Okay, moving to comments. Julie, do you have a comment or?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I abstained as well. This CEC resolution seems to be on a separate, on our community board level, seems to be local. And I felt uncomfortable with it. I didn't have enough depth to weigh in. But also, the CEC has so many major issues going on and we haven't weighed in on any of those. And this one was particularly picked out at this time that seemed politically motivated. So that was a couple reasons why I abstained.
Yeah, I know, it is a move for it, I know, but I think in terms of recommendations, which hopefully could be friendly, I think if we could, I would suggest removing the piece about like our internal operations, like how it came up with the items, just like the very beginning of the second paragraph. So revising, getting rid of the 2 members of the CB5 board, just saying like the meeting covered this topic. And then in the second to last paragraph, where we say like it renders the resolution and our comments moot, like I think keeping the resolution moot makes sense, but I don't know if we want to undermine our comments, even if they are moot, like I don't know if we want to go in telling them that they're moot. If they know it's moot, we know it's moot, but I don't know if we need to include that in the letter itself.
Renee, do you have any issue with those edits?
I'm happy to take out the two, you know, people. I'd like some language to understand how we got there. Like we have to understand that this situation is gone, right? Like this is like us going back to weigh in on the POPs, you know, of 2 months ago, where we already spoke, right? And so why are we, there were a lot of things that were brought up at this meeting. Currently, they're working on geographic preference. We got hundreds of letters on that issue. Narcon in schools. Those are actionable items, as Julie pointed out, that they're working on really right now that we should be involved in. We're going back to something that is already, the chancellor said it's not happening. We've never weighed in on CEC. Why are we, you know, I think we need to frame why, how do we get there? And the fact that we recognize like it is a moot topic.
Maybe revise like members of the board and the public, because there were a number of people who came to public hearings talking about this, and maybe that could address your concern of saying why we're addressing it, even though it's a good point.
I think then you have to add parents. We receive letters asking us to focus on CEC current issues, right? Like to Julie's point, I think, you know, there are a lot of actionable items and we're not doing that. And we, you know, I mean, I don't know. I will defer to what the board wants to do on this.
Yeah, I'm not saying to remove, I'm not recommending to remove the paragraph talking about the letters. I think that's fine, like that you have it in there already. It's a thought.
David?
I mean, I guess I have a broader question / comment. I mean, we're starting from a point of we will edit this to release it, but isn't the question whether we should be doing this at all? My concern in the letter is that it has a very balanced tone, and we saw evidence of the fact that any attempt to have a balanced tone on this issue is not well received. So, you know, if you really wanted to go in the direction that this issue has already gone, I don't know that you would recognize that perspectives may differ or that we received letters of support or anything else. It would be a position of the board that, you know, we were against it. So in some ways it reads almost too balanced.
I would agree with that.
So
Yeah, I think to Tristan's point, if we just strike 2 at the start of the second paragraph and then remove, and indeed our comments on the issue are moot, and indeed our comments on this issue, I think that would be appropriate. And it sounded like Renee was okay with that.
Sure.
So those changes, are there any other comments or questions?
I guess the first question, so when this comes up on Thursday, is it, well, what are we going to be voting on? Whether we should be releasing this letter or not in its edited form? Correct. Okay.
All right,
So which parts exactly are gonna get taken out?
sorry. please.
Which parts exactly are getting taken out?
Can you restate the 2 edits?
Yeah, so the 2 edits would be that on the second paragraph, which is 2 members of the CB5 board, it would just say members of the CB5 board. And then the second last paragraph, instead of saying thus making resolution 248, and indeed our comments on the issue, on this issue are moved, it would just say, thus making, resolution 248,
Sorry, and one addition from what I heard Tristan say, which would be in that second paragraph, it actually say members of.
Can you speak up a little bit, you're on?
But,
Can you speak up?
sorry, if I heard Tristan correctly, it's an additional to what Samir said. If we look at that second paragraph, members of the CB5 board and members of the public specifically requested. That's what Tristan originally said. That is what you said, correct?
in response to Renee's
Okay.
feedback, yeah.
Well, do you want to include that or not? I'm just tracking.
I'm fine with saying two, or if we want
Okay.
to say public, also fine with that.
Like, I have a question too, and it says the committee recognizes that the chancellor's like reaffirmed support. Are we gonna say, and we think that's great? Like this, the next paragraph is like perspectives differ and a little wishy-washy on it. Other, like the purpose of that in this letter as it is just say like, and none of it matters versus like, he's reaffirmed it and we think that's awesome. Thank you so much for standing up for trans girls and girls sports.
I think there is one sentence.
It's the prior paragraph, I think that.
We believe that the
Maybe
current
do that.
inclusive policies regarding gender identity in school sports are central to the well-being and fair treatment of all students.
If there's a way to like pull that out and make that more clear, I would be more comfortable with that, just from a.
There's an amendment that you.
Even in its own paragraph, I don't know, I would need to like. Put this into a board. doc.
Okay. Charles?
Oh, thank you. Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll try to be quick as possible. So, what's interesting about the response from the public is that the people who were for this resolution actually mentioned in their emails that they thought we could be doing a lot more better with our time than revisiting something that's already been muted. You know, and it's interesting that the three individuals from the public that came to the public session actually focused more on attacking the, you know, how Mr. Silverman conducted the hearings than actually spoke about the resolution. So, you know, I feel like, you know, with all that at the time, you know, it does feel like, you know, as we know, two of our former colleagues were ousted, accused of being transphobic. So when you're under that pressure, you know, that, you know, however you weigh on it, sometimes it's better to support, even though, you know, people might not truly feel that. So it's like, in a way, it's a feel good kind of like pacifying, you know, people into hearing what they want to hear and following the trend. But, you know, it is a sad state of affair, because I do want to comment that, you know, how that all was handled. You know, both sides, as Mr. Silverman said, and as the public speakers said, both sides didn't really listen to each other. But I am worried that it is a more of a political statement since it has been muted. I do agree that we should remove the two board members actually from the letter, because they didn't turn up to the public session, which is really bizarre that two people who would actually want the letter wouldn't even give any input at the meeting. So I thought that was strange. But yeah, like I said, I didn't get a copy of this letter, so I couldn't review it. But I think we should write something and say that we don't agree in matters of these being politicized, and that you know, we should have really dealt with it at the time, not after the time, because, you know, instead we're just making a political statement. I don't know what you guys think to that.
Thank you, Charles. Renee?
Thank you. So I want to say that for the BEX committee, we are normally unanimous. We try to get to where everyone can agree. And that we had 3 abstentions. There was hardly anybody at the meeting. I had 2 people privately call me after this resolution to say, I really wish I didn't vote yes on this. I'm not going to tell you who they are. And so this is a sort of anodyne letter, but I'm hoping that everyone can get behind it. That's where our voice is, and that's where we're strongest, right? As opposed to splitting our votes. I mean, I have always learned on this board that we're strongest when we speak with one voice. And so that's what we're trying to do here. I have never abstained from a vote in my own committee. So I'm just putting it out there that this was a tough thing, and we're trying to get as many people on board as possible.
So, I mean, I guess I'd like Renee's view on this, but I would propose deleting the third paragraph. The Bex Committee received several parent letters in support of the resolution. And I would delete the start of the second sentence in the last paragraph, while perspectives may differ. And it becomes more of a letter in support of actions that have already been taken, rather than somehow an even-handed presentation of an issue that does not have an even hand.
I don't necessarily agree with that, just because it's a fact that we received those letters. Like, I think we could still say that the committee, agrees with the chancellor's dismissal of this without like hiding the fact that people were, some people were in agreement with the resolution and some people weren't, and that honestly has nothing to do with us as a community board, but it's just, we received those letters, so I think it's fine to acknowledge them.
The parents, the parents that we heard from in our district, the only ones we heard from in our district were in favor of this resolution. And while I may not personally agree with it, we represent our community, right? We also have to take those voices into account. And so hiding those voices, I don't know that that's fair.
What about the second edit? Like, people feel strongly about that?
I'm sorry.
While perspectives may differ, I would strike it out.
Do you have a concern with, in the last paragraph, the second sentence where it says, while perspectives may differ?
No, that's fine.
Thank you.
So we'll vote that.
Remove that.
Right.
I mean, do you want to acknowledge how loud the public support was and public presence at our meetings? I feel like this is highlighting in its own paragraph. Like, we got like a handful of letters that were like in support of this resolution, but we had like a very loud, very long, like many public showing up at a meeting and being like, please do something about this. And like a very
Also had-
loud, yeah. Like, they're also members of our district because it's a political issue. It's not just a specific thing. Like, it's part of a, didn't fall out the coconut tree. Like, it exists in a context.
Go ahead, Renee.
I also think that we have never weighed in on a CEC issue. We heard the parents and we heard the individuals who came to our full board meeting, both spoke. I think we have to honor both of those. And I think, the committee came to a position. But I think we have to, recognize that those parents also existed, right? I don't know how you say they didn't. Like, I was getting all those letters. I think Brad received the letters. The rest of the committee received the letters. It's not that I necessarily agree with their position, but just because they weren't loud and at our meetings personally, I don't think that we can just ignore those letters. They're part of our community as well.
Could ignore the whole issue. Could not issue the letter.
Is that an option?
If we vote no, then yes.
You could move that, David, by the way.
I would move that.
To table.
Well, we have some.
Let's do members of the public, and then if that's the motion you want to make, David, we can do that. Sarah, Schachter Ehrenberg.
Okay, I unmuted. Did it work?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll try to be brief. My name is Sarah Schachter Ehrenberg. I am a member of CEC-D2. I am one of the Manhattan Borough President appointees. But I'm speaking as myself, not as a representative of, not speaking as the CEC. I just want to point out a couple things. Those of us from the CEC who spoke, Gavin Healy spoke at the meeting, the Bex meeting. He is an elected official. One could say that being appointed by someone who is the borough president means that you have a lot of elected power behind you, but I won't say that. Okay, you want to categorize me as a appointee? Fine, that's what I am. I voted against 248. I will continue to do that. It's a human rights issue. That's why it keeps coming up. I do want to note, I have no opinion on the removal of your colleague from CB5. I've worked with him. I will continue to work with him. I like him. We text. I don't know what to tell you. You know, I don't make that decision. Nobody, you know, that's the politician's decision. I do want to note that we were invited. Renee Kinsella invited us to attend that meeting, sent an email to the entire CEC, which was lovely. I RSVP'd, Craig RSVP'd, and Len RSVP'd apparently, and he was given a huge platform to explain his points. And it was great. He talked about the district priority, or which they got borough. This is wonderful. They talked about the Narcan in the schools. That's wonderful. All passed, which is great, unanimously even. So that's for the Narcan one. Lovely. So we've done some wonderful things right in CEC, but you know, I think that it wasn't publicized from that meeting. You got letters because your former, this is my hypothesis, because we get a lot of letters too. The letter writing out of the anti-trans movement is very strong, but you know who shows up at meetings and puts their bodies on the line are the members of the community about talking about human rights. And that is why we say thank you if you want to do the letter. That is wonderful. We know it's moot, but we also know that, like, I mean, not to be Godwin's law and talk about this, but like, you know, the Vatican apologized for what they did during Nazi times. It's all said and done. So it's over. All right. I will finish talking. Thank you very much. But do the letter, don't do the letter. That's totally fine. But don't make it, it's disingenuous to say that this was done as some sort of political move. We didn't move that. We were invited in, we came in and said our piece. You make a decision, that's wonderful. We appreciate that support and the support for all those trans students who came out, who were moved to tears. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Sarah.
I would not support a resolution to table this letter.
Sorry, if you're going to talk about the tabling, can we finish the public comment before we do that?
Sorry about that.
Thank you. Apologies if I mispronounced your name, Tamriora Reed.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you so much. Sorry, I'm outside. It's a little bit loud. My name's Tamira, and I'm a District 2 parent of a middle schooler who's been in the district since kindergarten. I'm also a member of, and he's in District 2. I'm a member of the CCSD, but I'm speaking on my own behalf tonight. I go to every CEC 2 meeting I have for years, and I am appalled by the outright violence, harassment, and bullying of our students, of our trans students, especially when they come to that space as students and leave in tears. This is not a benign resolution. Resolution 248 is anything but benign. The crafters, the sponsors of this resolution are known anti-trans movement followers. They have huge platforms. They bully kids online. They call trans girls fake. They say trans kids don't exist, that they're a social contagion. And then lo and behold, they craft Resolution 248. This is why we have hundreds of family members, students, parents, grandparents coming to the last 3 months of CEC 2 meetings. They are scared out of their minds. This resolution attacks trans girls, it attacks trans students, and it's trying to take away one proven method of increasing a feeling of inclusivity, of safety, of belonging for trans students who are 3 times more likely to commit suicide than their cis peers. Why in the world would we want to take something away that keeps these kids safe? And that is what this resolution is trying to undo. It's trying to undo human rights. It's trying to create a stigma against trans students. And this is not the first time they've tried this. It's sports, it's locker rooms, it's prisons, it's gender affirming care. You need to step in as a community council. Other community councils have, and it is not a moot point. It is not a moot point. They need to rescind this resolution, and they absolutely can. It's not like they're painting a building and they painted it already. They need to take it back, or this is going to continue.
Thank you. Gavin Healy.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. So I'm also a member of the District 2 Community Education Council. I'm an elected member. I'm one of the members who voted against Resolution 248 back in March. And I also spoke at the BEX committee meeting also to speak out against Resolution 248 and to urge you to write a letter to make a statement against this resolution. And I think that some of our views were really mischaracterized by some of the members of this community board, particularly by Ms. Kinsella. Yeah, we didn't really get a platform in that meeting to talk about our opposition to 248. And we spoke out against 248 on multiple occasions because our students are under attack. I'm the parent of a child at a school in Community Board 5, and we had a child at another school in Manhattan, in Midtown Manhattan, a trans girl who threw herself off the Queensboro Bridge earlier this year and died because of bullying. And so we've had gender guidelines in place for 5 years now that say that children can participate in sports based on their gender identity rather than their biological sex. And that makes a lot of sense. And a resolution to set up a committee to review those guidelines that are already in place and already give those students certain rights is not a neutral thing. If you have certain rights and someone wants to set up a committee saying whether you can continue to have those rights, that's an affront. That's an attack. The RCEC chose to find the most marginalized group of students and bully them and attack them. And when students came to our hearings to speak out against this, they felt also bullied and attacked, and they left in tears. This is the community that we are supposed to represent, that our CEC has not represented. So I would urge you as a community board to take action. This is not moot. This attack is still going on, and you need to step up. Thank you.
Thank you. Lupe Hernandez.
Good evening. My name is Lupe Hernandez, and I'm a New York City public school parent. I actually served on D2. I was a BP appointee by Mark Levine in the previous term, but I am here speaking my own personal capacity. And I will let you know that the CEC D2 deals with K through 8. And this resolution 248 was addressing issues that were not even coming to any community education council as concern. But what it did do was continue the strife and hate and fear and bullying that the previous speakers so eloquently described, because I too was going to bring up the lost lives of students that we have endured this past school year, and how this kind of message, that the resolutions like this that are sent, knowing that these resolutions half the time do not go anywhere, and the chancellor may say it's mute, but the intention and that fear and that hate that it brings to a community of our students that we are supposed to be protecting, uplifting, affirming, that is what our civic, the civil rights, human rights states. That's what our state law states. It's what the city law states. And it's what we as representatives should be doing. So I move you to not table this letter. I move you to make the correct statement. One of your members mentioned, why are you not stating that the community came out? And we continue to come out, because if you're going to mention the few handful of letters, you should mention the fact that we continue to show up in person.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Seeing no other members of the public, I'll go back to you, Renee.
Sure. I just want to address the comments that were made and directed at me. The participants are right. I did invite the CEC to attend. I invited them to attend specifically, and Len, who is the president, was the person who was given the greater platform. Everyone was given an opportunity to speak. The meeting went until 9 o'clock. We started at 6. I started to try and rein in the meeting after a while because we were hearing the same comments over and over, which respectfully were great and we wanted to hear it, but I lost, people were walking out of the room. And the reason that Len was given the platform that he was given is because he's the president of the CEC, in the same way that we would give deference to Brad. I wanted to make that clear. I also want to make clear that we have a letter that that is just not in support of that resolution. So, you know, we got where we needed to go.
So I was going to say, I would not support a motion to table this resolution. I think, as you can see from tonight, and as we've seen in our public meetings, there are a number of people who, to a number of people, this is a statement about people's lives and their dignity. So I don't think the issue ever becomes moot. To the extent that we're concerned that we are commenting on something that the chancellor has already resolved in one particular way, I will point out, we were asked to comment on this as early as April 11th. That was when people started showing up to our meetings and asking us to talk about it. I know it took a long time to get CEC2 to agree to a date to come here, but in part that may have been strategic on their part. They didn't want to make the issue bigger than it was. They came under a lot of political heat from it. It took them a while to get scheduled with us. I don't think we should use the fact that the chancellor made a subsequent action to prevent us from taking a stand. I wish the letter was stronger, but I think it's really, really important that we make a statement.
Charles, you've already spoken twice, but do you have an additional comment before I think I'm going to let David make his motion if he wants to, still wants to?
I'm sorry, Chair. Yeah, I just want to point out, because I heard the public speakers, they spoke so well, and I think what I'm worried about is the common theme is that they're concerned their voice wasn't heard, that they did not get their chance to speak on the platform that we provide them. And if I remember right, I remember one of the public speakers today who spoke actually said at the time that they didn't even know it was on the agenda. And I'm wondering, even though tabling might be seen as negative, in a way, if I'm right, if we tabled, that gives an opportunity. I'm wondering if we can have a fresh look at this and revisit it, especially since we didn't have quorum, especially since we had board members who were leaving in, you know, for whatever reason they were leaving in the middle of the public speakers speaking. Definitely their voices weren't heard that day by the full BEX committee. And I think, don't we owe it to them to make an exception under maybe your discretion, Chair, and just give one more chance for everyone to come to the table and speak, you know, fully have a re-go instead of rushing a letter, which I think the public speakers are, and I think one of the board members even said, doesn't really go as far as what they would like. And I am concerned, just one other quick thing. I do hope that the two board members would reconsider, especially hearing the public speakers who want to hear support from their community board members, and keep that line in the letter that two board members did bring the issue from the executive, did bring the issue to the board, and not just use the word board members, as it feels like, if you say board members, it feels like everyone was involved with bringing it to the issue. But in fact, there's two board members today in the executive that solely brought it to the BEX committee. I just want to end with saying our committee chair, she really did the best she could do that night. It was very late at night, and she really tried her best to hold everyone together, and she did let everyone know that there were people leaving. So she really, I do feel she did the best she could. But like I said, if we could do a re-go, I think, and if you want to, I know maybe you could ask the public here today if they would be happy with that, but I think they would. Just one more re-go to go through this one more time at the BEX committee, and to ensure that we do have a quorum this time.
Anyway, I'm going to give, I said I was going to give you the option. So if you want
to take my name,
I'll do Todd and Libby since I don't do all talking about this.
Okay. I've listened very carefully to this. It's a hot button issue. It's part of our history, a traumatic part of our history. We can't hide from it. Our BEX committee is making a good faith effort. They're not ignoring it and airbrushing it out of existence. They drafted this letter, as you heard from Renee, to try to put this behind us. It's anodyne in the extreme. I see no problem with this letter. I think we should give deference to the committee that put it forward. Renee has graciously agreed to accept some amendments to it. And I think if we pull it back and say absolutely nothing, what are we doing? Right? I think we should just go with it and just put it behind us. We're on record of not supporting this resolution. And I think there's something to be said for the fact that Renee and other people, in spite of their disagreements with the people who brought this resolution, they listened to them, even though the vast majority of us, I believe, are not in favor of it. I think we should go with the letter.
Right, thank you. Libby.
I would feel more comfortable if this was a stronger, we support trans girls thing, or at least more strongly acknowledging the amount of public comment. Even at this executive meeting, we're getting a lot of public comment. Like it is a continuous and loud and consistent. Like I'm not receiving all of the letters that Renee got, but I would feel more comfortable if we did that. I moved to say like the committee wholeheartedly supports, so that it's very clear the committee is taking a position that we reaffirm that the Chancellor Banks has, reaffirmed the support for the existing policy that trans girls, like you are allowed to participate in sports with your gender identity as expressed at school. But to make it like, we think this is good, and then also to add in about like the level, something about like the volume and level of in-person comment and attendance at our meetings.
Okay, for those two amendments, can you point out like paragraphs and
Is the paragraph that starts, I guess, like with the several parent letters, because then it goes, the committee also heard comments at this meeting and other meetings. So I'd say something like both in, I wouldn't even say like both in, it'd be like some in, support of it, but also like loud. Because if we're coming out in support of this, we should also be giving our reason why we've come down on that we've heard a lot of very, very loud opposition to this resolution. It's human rights issue, that it's not going away, that it matters. But we should also explain that's part of why then we're saying what we're saying and saying we agree with this that currently exists. We wholeheartedly support the Chancellor. But so I would add something in that paragraph, but I would rewrite the line.
yeah, sorry, just so for specificity's sake, so that like some of the other resolutions can you sort of
Sorry.
spell out the actual changes that you're proposing.
I'd say like some in support of the CEC's resolution.
What line number?
I've got,
paragraph.
yeah,
I don't think we have line numbers on the letter, but if we have, you can sort of start reading.
it starts with like the BEX committee received several parent letters, blah, blah. The committee also has heard comments at this meeting and at other meetings where the resolution was raised. I would change it to say like some in support of CEC2. And like, as well as like tremendous, like loud opposition. Or like voluminous opposition. I don't know what word people want to use.
Okay. Renee, do you have any concern for those edits?
So I'm concerned with taking that route. The committee talked about this. We get a lot of input on a lot of things. Are you prepared, for example, to say, we just heard community groups that were very loud against City of Yes? Are we going to take those groups, those loud voices that we heard, and say in our City of Yes resolution that they were opposed? If that's how we're going to go, if that's what we want to do, is take the voices that we hear and incorporate them in the resolutions, then I'm happy to do that with everything. We'd have to do that with City of Yes. We heard two community groups that were vehement against City of Yes because of the lack of affordability. We did not include those in our resolution. So if we're purporting to represent who's coming to our meetings, then we're going to have to do that all the time, I would say.
I would also be okay with striking the paragraph entirely, which I think Tristan had moved to do earlier. And say that we got, like, just strike the whole thing if we got letters at all. I'm happy to go back to that.
Okay.
But I do want to keep the wholeheartedly piece.
Okay. Are you making that motion, or did you?
I'll make the motion for the second one. We're just dealing with the first one now, but I thought we would deal with the second one.
The second one is
the committee wholeheartedly supports Chancellor Banks in his, like, in reaffirming his support.
Instead of recognizing, you're saying change recognizing. to-
Yeah, to like wholeheartedly supports Chancellor Banks, and then you have to change the language to make it grammatically correct for the rest of the sentence.
Second.
Do you have any concerns with that, Renee, or if you could take it to a vote, but you could.
I mean, I'm going to abstain. I think, you know, that's my position. And so go ahead.
All right, let's take that change to a vote.
So.
So one person open it for debate.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't agree with that. I think, I agree with what Todd said. The Bex committee did a really good job in trying to hear both sides. And I think the letter is our good faith effort to resolve this issue.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanna, stick to the facts and not add in any sort of like subjective adjectives. I think it's enough to say like, yeah, if we wanna say like, the committee supported that, because I think that's what the vote came out to be, then I think that's fine. And I think that gets the point across, so.
Kristen,
I could be in favor of that.
Like, I'm in favor of the change, and like, I'll say, like, we took a position as a committee, but we didn't all write the letter together, so like. I think it's overrated, but it's not like we all sat down and debated, should we wholeheartedly something? I think it was an assumption that we all supported. Or we were all opposed to it, so one would say it's all wholeheartedly with a couple abstentions of the committee. So if you like, everyone was in favor of the position, so I don't think anyone would argue against making that change.
Aaron?
So, I agree with Julie, with Todd's comments, we've discussed a few edits that Renee graciously agreed to. I think some of the critiques about the process of Renee, I feel like are very unfair, and the process of Bex and Renee as running the meeting seem unfair and unwarranted. So, my desire is let's get the letter in front of the full board and get people to chime in on the letter, as is with some of the edits we've already made, this evening.
We do have a motion, so I'm gonna take a vote for that motion, which is to change it from recognizes to wholeheartedly supports, then the grammar changes after that. And then after that, I would like to take this to a vote for the actual letter itself. So,
Okay.
Let's take a vote.
Okay, Julie.
No.
Onker,
Yes.
Catherine,
Yeah.
Aaron,
No.
Tristan,
Yes.
Libby,
Yes.
Renee.
Yeah.
Samir,
Yes.
I'm a yes. Todd,
No.
David,
Yes.
Janice.
No.
That passes 7 to 5 to 1.
And I'd like a motion to,
I'll make a motion to approve the letter with all the edits we already talked about, that Renee approved, and then also this most subsequent, or this most.
Seconded.
any. Than that before we take it to the vote. Okay, do a vote.
Julie,
Yes.
Onker,
Yes.
Catherine,
Yeah.
Aaron,
Yes.
Tristan,
Yes.
Libby,
Yes.
Renee.
I'm sorry, what are we voting on? I'm sorry, I lost
The letter with the edits.
the letter with the edits.
Yeah, the
gonna
edit
abstain.
that you agreed to plus the one that we just made. Okay. you
Yeah, I'm
abstained.
gonna, yeah.
Okay. Samir,
Yes.
I'm a yes. Todd,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Janice.
Yes.
Okay. That passes, with 2 abstentions.
That's great. So we will present those, both of those items to the full board as part of the normal process. All right, so the next is reviewing the public hearing and full board agenda. So, I mean, you should all have a copy of that right now. So essentially, we're going to do the typical public hearing, which will be led by Todd this time around. In this role.
See if I can save my voice for those.
Yeah. And then we will do the full board with approving the minutes. And I believe we may be just approving the minutes from May for this go around, and then the June ones will come out our next meeting. And then I will give a chair's report. Kind of welcoming everyone to their first cycle of meetings, going over some of the attendance procedures and concerns for new members, particularly in light of our failure to make quorum at meetings. It's an ongoing issue, just to remind people of those policies as voted on by our board previously. And then I will give sort of an overview of City of Yes, which we will touch on later, but explaining a little bit the executive committee's process generally, which I did in email, but then also yesterday at our meeting. And then give kind of an update on the borough board process as well. And then we will announce the bylaws committee, which we'll discuss later tonight, and ask if members would like to be a part of that, to reach out to myself and Tristan. We will also put out a call for bid reps and explain a little bit about what that is and what that means, opportunity is. And then an update on the social event, I believe, here in team building. Then we'll go into committee reports, which I would like to do now. And then I do want to discuss as part of this a little bit about how get the thoughts of the executive committee on the process for the City of Yes one, which is the last item on our agenda. Because I expect that one to be time consuming and a little bit how we want to address this process, particularly as it seems that there may be potential amendments to that resolution from the floor. So when we get to that one, I can give some initial thoughts, but I do want to hear what others think. So I'd say let's start off with Parks.
Hi, I'm presenting on behalf of Kim. This is my first time, so I hope you let me know if this isn't what I'm supposed to be telling you. But we saw 3 things on our agenda this month. We had a presentation from the Central Park Conservancy on their Harlan Muir Shoreline project and boardwalk, and also the North End recirculation projects. That was just a presentation. We had an activation at Bryant Park by the camera company Instax. It's on the upper terrace. It's going to be on August 15th. And a proposal for the beautification of Oliver Stone area in Union Square. So the presentation from like Central Park was really just about improving the sustainability, like resilience, like ecological health of the general area. It was an update on this project. This wasn't a resolution, but it was about enhancing sort of like the park's beauty, increasing ADA access, and then a lot of it had to do with the water quality and recirculation. And we got a report on the history of how that sort of came into being. It was super informative, always great to work with the Central Park folks. So their first resolution is about the Instax activation event. This is the camera company at Bryant Park. So Fujifilm, represented by Factory 360, applied for this activation permit. It's August 15th. It's going to be on the Bryant Park Upper Terrace from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. It's a truck that then has all of the inflatables attached to it and coming off of it. So it's very self-contained, and you walk into it. It's sort of the introduction of these Instax products, which are instant camera things where the film comes out immediately. Setup begins at midnight, the day of the event, breakdown will conclude by 11:30 p.m. that night. The attendance is expected to be between 3,000 and 4,000 attendees, which we had some questions about. There's going to be adequate staffing, amplification. We also addressed in our resolution the product concerns about photos, and we strongly urge the applicant to implement higher privacy and digital imagery rights standards, which Todd has been vehemently, advocating for. And we voted 9-0-0-0 in favor of that unanimously.
We're going on to the next one.
And then
Questions to that? Okay.
I'm gonna go really fast here. And the second one is the beautification of Oliver Stone, which is a memorial to a man, Oliver Johnson. who it's a rock that now exists next to the dog park, between the stairs and the dog park in Union Square. And we discussed sort of preserving and enhancing the Oliver Johnson Memorial Rock there. And so some of his contributions, which, you know, you may not know, is his advocacy for gay rights and the Silence Equals Death Project. He was involved in the active advocacy and protecting the Ladies Mile Historic District. And he was part of the conceptualization and of the first 100 Hearts auction for the Union Square USPCC, like the community council. And so it's a testament to his enduring legacy and his impact on the community. The committee expressed very, very strong support for this. We heard a lot more about his legacy. His name was one of the names read during Madonna's concert, about everyone lost to AIDS. It was like a very, very moving presentation. We actually wanted it to be like even more support than what they were asking for initially. And so we wrote a letter of support to Councilmember Rivera, and the partnership has also agreed to support this, even though it's not technically an official landmark thing. But there was some discussion about that, and we unanimously approved the letter. Which we can talk about letters more later. 9000. There's also an edit in the draft where it says it's 10, but it's not.
Any questions? Comments?
I think because again, this is going to the full board, similar to the other letter, we should phrase it as coming from the board, not from the committee. So everywhere it says, coming from, like, you know, the committee says this, the committee says that, should say the board.
Okay, so the way to structure it is to say the board says this based on the recommendations of its committee. Right, because then we're giving due deference to the committee, and it's appreciating the work that was done by the committee.
Yeah, I'm happy with it coming from the full board and making it as loud as possible. There was a lot of support for this. It was very moving.
Moving on, I see the Landmarks Committee, we do not have Mark or Kevin here tonight, and we did not receive their resolutions. Okay, so I will follow up with them. I did attend that, so I can kind of go through at least the first two for that one. So the first one was an application for Sephora, and essentially they were modifying their storefronts to change the displays, and they were required to come before the Landmarks Committee because even though it's an entirely interior project, they are starting to block windows in a historic district. So they were required to come before the board. Do you have the vote by any chance? Marissa? Okay, all right, we'll follow up with this.
It's not my spreadsheet.
But I believe that will pass, but we'll have to update you the exact actual package, the vote count for that one. The next one was 115 Fifth Avenue, which I believe was the applicant was Aritzia, and they were doing some work on their exterior, which included signage for them. They wanted to add some additional flags. And there were some LED screens as well that they wanted to put inside. I know that this was a great concern to the committee, including particularly the flags and the LED signage within there. I believe the vote was a deny unless those items were removed. Again, we want to update you all with the full vote for that. And then I was not around. I did not spend 95 minutes in Avenue. So I'm not sure what to do in this process. I have not experienced this before, so I don't know what the answer is for the executive committee. We do not have the resolutions nor the members in front of us. Any context or history on that, Marissa?
No, I haven't experienced it either. I mean, I believe the first two resolutions were pretty straightforward. The third resolution is a little more complicated because we have after the fact meeting for residents that are strongly opposed to the bulkhead addition, top addition.
Yes.
So I'm not sure what they're doing with that in the resolution.
Yeah, and I did speak with Mark about that. I mean, this is a publicly noticed meeting, and so they were given the opportunity to comment and to weigh in, sort of make that make their disagreement to this known to the committee in advance of that meeting, and they, fortunately, none of them did attend. So I think they were considering putting a nod to that, but I don't think that all changes the outcome.
I do know that residents will come out to the whole board meeting.
Okay. Any questions or comments to those resolutions? All right, let's move on to land use.
Okay. So our first item, 520 Madison Avenue, application to open air cafe. So the applicant, the operator, is unknown, so the applicant, was representing the property. They came to us seeking the certification of, zoning resolution 37-625, which would allow for design changes to update the current POPs, set forth in 3770 for public plaza. So that is a certification by the chairperson of CPC. In regards to, they're also seeking to do an open air cafe. So for anyone, anyone new or unaware, so an open air cafe is allowed, as long as it does not contain, over 1/3 of the frontage of the overall POPs. So there are limits. And the design changes were very beneficial and positive. I think there was some feeling that this was, it would have been nice to happen prior, but the applicant submitted a great proposal for the design changes, upgrading the entire plaza, and is seeking the permission of the open air cafe. Just a couple things to highlight. They are bringing the plaza up to be ADA compliant. They are fixing the drainage systems, as well as the updating the water feature. And then committee had a discussion about some usual items in regards to open air cafes regarding the non-exclusive use of the tables and chairs for patrons. Community Board 5, the Land Use and Housing and Zoning Committee has been requesting all applicants to agree to stipulations that would be signed, an affidavit that would be signed by them, stating that they would allow for the public to use the tables and chairs in the open air cafe, that they don't have to purchase anything from that operator. This applicant was not willing to agree to that. So the tables and chairs in this cafe will be exclusive for patrons and customers of this restaurant. They will be a server restaurant, not a grab and go. But based on the rules, they will not have any obstructions or solid fencing or planters around the area, which will make it easily collapsible when the operator is not operating. The other discussion point was about public bathrooms and access to the restaurant bathrooms with members of the public. The applicant was also not willing to agree to that request. Community Board 5 is on record requesting that over the last few years, where that's become a community priority for us, especially with Julie's committee and the task force on that issue. Another item that was brought up, that was a newer request from the committee, based on some, I think, public comments or comments from other members of the board, was the potential to make Wi-Fi available in POPs, public plazas, and open air cafes. The applicant didn't have any plans, but didn't have any objections to that. But that was a little bit of an open question. But it was an interesting thought going forward, sort of be part of our comments for this type of application. The committee unanimously supported this application for the design changes as well as open air cafe. Sorry, we denied it. We denied it based on those stipulations. So it was a denial, a unanimous denial.
Questions? Comments? Oh, God.
I'm so glad to hear that you're sticking to your guns about the bathrooms and the use of the public seating. Because in parks and public spaces, in the time that where we dealt with that issue and other concerns, that has always been a big thing. That in public spaces, if they're going to be given these rights for the outdoor cafes, that they have to make some kind of.
Yeah.
Okay, next item, moving along. So we have a hotel special permit application for 10 Rockefeller Plaza. Hotels are not permitted as of right in commercial or residential zones. It's not a permitted use case. So for an applicant seeking a hotel, this is a common process. And it's referred to in the zoning resolution under section 32-153 and 74-152, where they're requesting a use group change. So in this case, it is a commercial building operated as part of the Rockefeller Center, which is a historic landmark. A 17-story commercial building has been mostly vacant for a few years. They are looking to take part of that space from the floors, not the entire 17 stories, but a portion of that to make into a hotel with a new operator. This is on between Fifth Avenue and Sixth Avenue on 48th Street. It's right next to the Today Show studio, for anyone familiar with that. So adjacent to the fountain and the public skating area. So the proposed change of use will consist of this change of use from office to hotel on the cellar, subcellar, and 7th through 16th floors of that building. The proposed hotel will include approximately 728,000 square feet gross commercial floor area and approximately 136 hotel rooms. In order to meet the provisions of this permit, there's three main stipulations the applicant must agree. The first one is the site plan incorporates elements that address any potential conflicts between the proposed use and its adjacent uses, such as the location of the proposed access to the building and to service of areas for refuse and laundry of buildings, orientation and landscaping. So that is not an issue at this location. The other stipulation is such use will not cause undue vehicular or pedestrian congestion on local streets or unduly inhibit vehicular or pedestrian movement for loading operations. We had a detailed conversation of the applicant's plan to address that. In that part of Rockefeller Center, the great thing about that location is that a lot of all the truck loading and unloading happens on the cellar levels. Nothing is done on the street level, which is a great situation for all the buildings in that 3-block area, where all that's done underground, which makes this very efficient for that space. And the third stipulation is such use will not impair the future use or development of the surrounding areas. So the committee felt that this was a very great location for this hotel, and that it would not impact in a negative way pedestrian or vehicular flow. and the applicant provided all the documentation to verify those three stipulations. You know, the applicant sort of volunteered, based on some of the discussions, that the process was a little bit onerous, and cumbersome, and, the time that it took to do it, you know, was not ideal for their, business operations. So we included a whereas, stating that comment, about the process. You know, there have not been a lot of uses of hotel permits since that, went into, as a rule, I believe, well, 4 or 5 years ago, this is the first one in the city. You know, as for some context on that, you know, their CB5 did have challenging, in the Flatiron District, there had been a proliferation of hotels that really had some impact on residential areas, over the last 10, 15 years. But this is the first project to come to us under the new permit in CB5. So given this is a commercial district, and part of the tourist hub of Midtown, we all supported this proposal. So the committee unanimously voted to approve this.
Questions? Comments? David?
Yeah, I just want to kind of amplify what Aaron said. I mean, this is the first time that a hotel special permit has made it this far in the process. So there's been no other hotel permit issue. I think it's even beyond CD5, but at least in CD5. And one of the things that the applicant had to do in order to get this far was sign a neutrality agreement with the hotel workers union, which, you know, isn't the bailiwick of our review, but and it's taken them, I think they said close to 2 years, and you know, probably 7-figure number to get this far in the process. So I mean, at some point, maybe we would want to look at coming out against this special permit structure. It's holding back the development of hotels in our district, which relies on this as a source of employment and tax revenue to accommodate travelers. So yeah, we went through and we approved it, but the undercurrent was that it's kind of a crazy a process to put somebody through to build a hotel.
So I wanted to basically echo David's comments and maybe even suggest that we at Landmarks at Land Use look into maybe a task force to examine this issue more closely. My research showed it was the first hotel period in the last 5 years. And as we had comments about this in our discussion, as the supply of hotel rooms has dried up, and the demand has increased, in part because also some hotels are being used by the city for other purposes. Prices have simply skyrocketed. And the history of this special permit is in large part sort of intertwined with de Blasio's presidential campaign. Because as David, you pointed out, to even get this far, you have to agree to terms with certain labor unions, which are often not economical. Maybe in Midtown Manhattan at Rockefeller Center, it can be. You'll get very, very expensive hotel rooms, but I suppose that is what happens when you limit supply.
Okay, I concur with my colleagues. At the time that the special permit process was passed, it was seen as a blatantly political act to curry favor with the labor unions. Any effort at doing a balanced analysis of how the permitting process would impact on the market for hotels and hotel spaces was either ignored or shoveled aside. So we have to look closely at this. There's a lot of hotels in our district. It impacts my business, quite honestly. There are many hotels, the prices have gone way up. But it's worth looking at it and taking a balanced look and balancing the equities, how this is impacting our district.
That's it. My only comment was, we did hear from this applicant, I believe it's Landmarks, when they were restoring the outside of the hotel, something like facade. And I remember thinking, why would we doing this? And discovering that the hotel. So I just wanted to relate this to the work, the level of work that the applicant has done to create an opportunity for this to happen. So we did hear, I think back in April, or May, we heard from Landmarks. I think on this, maybe, like, yeah,
Last
yeah,
year.
last
I
year.
think I remember the.
Yeah,
definition, Yeah,
last-
it's almost like the freeze, yeah.
Right, the freeze, exactly. So my point is that these are all, it is related, because I asked at the time, what else were they gonna do besides the freeze, and this is the what else, so it does follow. I just wanted to relate it some way with that. If you think it relates, but it does.
All right. So, yes, I'm not even sure how to summarize this. I feel like we've had this a lot. So let me do this. So let me start with our sort of approach to this. So we have, the resolution sets the stage with some historical context, how we got to the situation we're in now, right? So this is a citywide proposal meant to address the housing shortage, but also address affordable housing. And, you know, I say that because I think there's a lot of the conversation around the committee was about measures to generate housing versus the balance of what's going to generate more affordable housing, which is the overall volume. And you know, there's some citywide initiatives. We've commented on a few of those, but there's low density proposals that don't affect Community Board 5, that affect Brooklyn and Queens and other boroughs a lot more. So I'm gonna read the list so that everyone's clear on the main sections. And then I'm gonna jump ahead and talk to our recommendations and sort of work backwards about, you know, how we're looking to comment on such a massive text. You know, we had 2 full committee meetings. We had a consultant do additional research. Julie and Nancy and Renee were really a team working on this over the course of probably 3 months at this point, working with research, all sorts of research from various city agencies, from DCP, as well as our consultants, and really did an incredible, well-rounded, robust job of research and analysis, which was definitely a challenge given the timeline to get this to full board for this month. So so I hope some of you have had a chance to look at the video from the meetings. I would say the DCP presentation was recorded on YouTube, and I could try to say like the time markers for what would be most beneficial. But they devoted, we had an entire land use meeting that was DCP presenting the plan. We were able to sort of digest it, come back with comments, and then had a round 2 where DCP presented based on our feedback. So 2 full meetings of videos. And, you know, everything is really centered around affordability. How does this plan address affordability? Areas of area, you know, AMI discussions, area median income. There's a good snapshot which sort of talks about all these things. So the low density districts, there's a proposal to address town center zoning, which essentially in some low density areas, a single story business is not permitted to have newly built apartments in an area that has 4 to 5 story buildings. They're unable to sort of build above commercial on avenues in those low density districts. So that was a measure that doesn't really drastically affect us. We didn't really dive into that much. But that is what the town center zoning would be, to enable 2 to 3 story residential stories above commercial uses on at the ground floor. There was a desire to look at transit-rich parts of the city that are more conducive to this development than others. So places around the city that have access to transit. The definition of what is transit-rich, is a little bit, I don't know if they had a strict criteria for that. So it's a little bit of an interpretation of what is that direct, but transit-rich, how close does that mean? But the mapping would sort of overlay and specifically target those areas. The other proposal, going through this. Accessory dwelling units, so allowing single family homes to have garage apartments, etc. So that was what the ADU situation was. Our focus is really on the medium and high density proposals, which are what we're calling the proposal under universal affordability preference, UAP. UAP is a voluntary program where developers can basically get bonuses for building affordable units that are permanently affordable units. The challenge in CB5 is that, and we had a lot of discussions about this, that the most of the development CB5s are condos. Condos are not rental buildings. This incentive is specifically designed, and DCP stated that the intention is to really spur development of market rate rental buildings with affordable units in them. So the intention is to try to offset the condo development in the city, and especially our area, with more rental buildings, and using the AMI percentages of the 60% average, where some units are lower than 60%, some are higher than 60%, and would allow those developments to be 20% bigger than they would be permitted as of rights. So that is really the bulk of what UAP means for us. In addition to that, there's several mechanisms for the transfer of development rights across the city under CB5 that would allow a wider geography of where development rights for landmarks can be transferred. Currently, the transfer of development rights is only to adjacent zoning lots around the same block that are either touching the zoning lot or adjacent across the street. The change in this proposal would be a more wider area of approximately 2 to 3 times that over the adjacent blocks of the zoning lots, which would make additional transfers possible to up to 2 or 3 times the amount of receiving sites, depending on the block. And again, zoning lots are tricky because they can be merged, they can be divided. A zoning lot can be assembled where you have an entire block is now one lot, even though it would have consisted of 8 unique zoning lots at some point. So adjacent zoning lots is the geography is really based on what is actually there to look at. We had a nice discussion about the lack of a standardized way of tracking for really transparency and for the public to know how many development rights exist at locations, how many are out there, and we really don't know what is the volume of development rights that is available by districts. DCP knows once transactions have happened, but we've seen the assemblage of development rights, years in the making. So it's a real big unknown, but there is no mandate for affordability in the proposal that allows for unlimited transfer of air rights. So in lower Manhattan and some areas of Manhattan that have a high volume of landmarks, you're going to see a very high volume of development rights change hands, which will allow projects to have a lot of density that does not exist now. And some of the comments we made about that proposal was that there's no mandate for affordability in that transfer as currently proposed. So that was one of the things we highlighted. Julie has done extensive research on this, and is sort of well versed in the AMIs, so I'll let her jump in on some of that as well. But the core of our discussion, which ultimately was a support of City of Yes with conditions, you know, typically the amount of conditions we have, you know, we had sort of that discussion at committee about, are we approving this with conditions or are we denying unless these conditions are made? So the list looks long. I would say, you know, it's based on historical precedent. It's probably rare that we have an approval with that long of a list, but they're sort of hitting on larger categories because we don't have the specific recommendations for some of these umbrella recommendations, which, you know, the committee meeting got a little bit cut short, where we didn't have the time to sort of go into the numbers. So we sort of did agree on a list of those sort of recommendations. And we were working under the idea that the real goal here is to provide DCP, which will ultimately have their hearing, to City Planning Commission, which will ultimately go to a city council vote on this topic, just like they did on other CDBS initiatives, economic opportunity, sustainability. And we anticipate that City Council will have a robust discussion and vote on this, and that they will take into consideration community board feedback, as well as feedback from the community at large. I know Brad has a little bit update on this because Borough Board had been meeting today. But the resolution was attempting to capture those recommendations, since rather than react to, as if we would on an individual permit or an individual application, given the large scope of this, because in reality, there's hundreds of proposals in this zoning text. It's a 1,300-page zoning text update. The zoning text update does take away a lot of text. So we are, in essence, deregulating a lot of what was done in 1961. So we are removing a lot of things in order to sort of streamline and make efficiencies. And there's a lot of items down to individual parking restrictions, down to the size of the rear yard that impact light and air. So there's also items about the overall, what is the official size of an apartment? So when we talk about affordability units, there is right now, there is a minimum square footage that an apartment legally has to be in New York City. This zoning text changes what is considered a legal apartment.
Changes the dwelling unit factor, but not the minimum unit size. That's determined by building code and MDL. So.
Well, okay, right,
So,
dwelling unit factor, but the square footage, but there is a reference to specific square footage of what a legal apartment is.
Yeah, and I think MDL and building code 80 square feet for bedrooms and 150 square feet for the living area. That's not gonna change. So everybody should be.
It's out of zoning, but not on the other places.
Okay. So I'm not sure the best way to summarize everything else that we want to talk about.
We've talked about it quite a bit, so I think let's move to questions unless you have anything else. And I want to talk to, we'll do the normal process, and then I do want to talk a little bit about the procedure for this, because I think this will be one of the longer items we will discuss on Thursday. So let's do questions. Todd?
I'd like to ask the experts here, in combing through all the literature, there's a lot of talk about how the community board's traditional role in review is going to be limited and changed. And also how the ULURP process, which we all know come, I wouldn't say love, but we view it as a tool to keep tabs and exercise our due diligence over the community. How specifically is that being changed by this, the totality of everything that Aaron just mentioned?
MIH is still triggered, and wherever there's MIH, there's gonna be ULURP approval. And then to use the 12.0 FAR, which a lot of advocates have been asking for, that's gonna trigger ULURP and MIH as well. So there will be a say for these larger buildings, but that 20% boost, the UAP, that's gonna be as of right. So buildings are gonna be getting bigger.
So for our, and this is something that it's very dense and the procedure is going to be critical and how our full board is going to view this and consider it. So the 20% increase in an already dense neighborhood is going to limit our ability to comment as we have in the past. Is that essentially what's
dedicated to affordable?
Yeah. So there, I would say there are several changes where currently there are special permits, which whether they're ULURP or not, because every action is not ULURP, right? So ULURP goes to a city council, but there are special permit applications that will have community approval by changing them to sort of CPC certifications. That does limit the amount of public hearings. So that does matter when you're changing something from a permit to a certification. It does limit community review, and there are items, and again, there's so much to talk about it, but there is a trend in this proposal to make more certifications versus permits in order to streamline certain things. You could argue for better or for worse, but there is less, city council will be reviewing less. There is less for community boards. So there is an overall, lessening of those to your, from item 10. Thank you. Concord?
We did ask questions about these sort of points, including the density of central Midtown. My recollection, and folks can disagree if they don't think this is a fair summary, but DCP noted that they're actually, by right, currently today, we don't require affordable housing, and much of Midtown is an FAR 12, which is the cap. They're actually lowering. They talked about several times how it effectively gets lowered by right, unless you're going to put in the 20% affordable. So in terms of this fear of increased density, that we asked about that, and that DCB said that this will not do that. There will be future potential rezonings, and they said all of those will go through ULURP. So the Midtown South change, which could add significantly more density in certain parts of Midtown South, but that would go through a normal ULURP process with us.
Just one other thing. So we had the recent Supreme Court decision that is going to limit the ability of government agencies to implement broad regulatory schemes or changes like this. In all of the work, and of course it only came up recently, but we knew it was coming before observers of the legal scene knew it was coming. Has there been any discussion of how that might impact how this scheme is going to work? And if so, will it be for good or for ill? Will it, I mean, that's something that we should know, no?
The committee, though, that seems like a little bit beyond our purview, but
Well, not
but
really,
it's
because.
federal.
No, it's first of all, it's federal, it's not local.
No, but
And
the,
it-
but the,
and it's
the point is, there are gonna be federal decisions that may either add to density or subtract from density based on what happens. And that's the sort of thing we should at least notice, right? Because if we're increasing density by 20% and there's federal provisions acting that impact our districts.
Which federal provisions increase density from the, what do you, it's not.
Sorry, please limit the comments. I would say, I mean, I think when that comes, I think that's something definitely, if when and if that comes, that's something we should definitely respond to, but it seems as though maybe that's something that's a little bit beyond the scope of the City of Yes Housing Opportunity proposal, but I mean, I welcome comments if there are people who disagree. Libby, I saw that you had your hand up. Do you still?
Oh, no, I've just got a headache.
I think maybe that's an amendment that can be made along with the other slew of amendments that will probably come.
Yeah, we'll get to the
But
process.
I just wanted to address what we were saying about community input. So our district already, so UAP is an expansion of this thing called the AIRS program, affordable, I forgot what exactly it stands for, but AIRS. And so with that program, you can already have an FAR bump and you don't have to go through a ULURP. And so UAP is basically taking that and applying it to all affordable housing. So it's basically, you know, we, the city, and I guess community boards, the council at the time agreed that senior affordable housing was important enough that it should be streamlined and skip ULURP. And now we are weighing in on if we think all affordable housing is important enough to be streamlined and skip ULURP. So yes, it would skip ULURP for these, you know, 20% FAR bumps. And it's our decision if we think that is a worthwhile trade-off.
Any other questions or comments to the resolution? You're on.
Just a typo that Janice is listed as voting to both approve it and oppose it, and Myrtle is not listed. So I assume one of Janice's votes is Myrtle's.
I think Janet is against it, so we'll correct the vote.
Or Janet voted twice, perhaps.
Voter, you know.
Janice Young or Janice Young?
Okay, so then the next thing I want to talk about a little bit is the procedure for this at the full board, because I think as we are getting maybe a little bit of a sampling tonight, people will want to kind of talk about this. This is a very important process. I think it's been said, and I agree that this is probably one of the most important things that we will do on this board, and probably one of the most important things this board has done, full stop. That said, the process was came at an unfortunate time for us in terms of, you know, our cycles. You know, we had people coming onto the committee after sort of partway through the process, and we had changes in sort of some of the leadership. So I do want to give people the opportunity to weigh in on this, because I do think it's very important that we, and also I think it strengthens the ultimate resolution if it comes sort of with the voice of our board position of consensus, ideally, you know, increasing our votes on this so that we are sort of speaking as one voice. But I do also want to balance the fact that this has gone through a committee process that is meant to sort of vet this. So I want to try and balance those two things so that we are not sort of creating an environment where we're creating open season on resolutions across the board, and recognizing that this one is sort of a very important one that we have to try to get right. So to that end, what I'm thinking we might do is that after the presentation, the questions and the comments, I would think that potentially we could open this up to sort of acting as a committee of a whole to apply and sort of collect any potential amendments to this, be they sort of additional stipulations, or I think we've seen some comments of people who want to modify or adjust some of the whereases or adjust some of the whereases. I'm also very open, but I want to hear people's comments of maybe limiting that time so that it's set for, you know, if we do this for 45 minutes, if we do this for an hour, so that people are sort of focused and we don't ramble and don't sort of stray. At the end of that, we would then, I believe the process is that we would vote to take those to the full board, which would then be us. We'd move out of the committee of the whole, and then we would vote on those resolutions either as a bundle, or we could do them one at a time. I think it would depend on sort of what the resolutions were, so that we can ultimately get to a final resolution that we will then vote on as a board. So with that framework, are there concerns? Are there questions? Is there something I've overlooked in trying to address it that way? Sorry, Libby.
Are we gonna vote on, if we're in committee of the whole and people want to offer amendments, how is the voting on each of those things gonna work? I'm worried about a Christmas tree type of bill situation where people start adding stuff and then it's not cohesive anymore, and then nobody wants it.
They will need to be germane in order to be amended. So they will have to be about the city of Yes housing opportunity. But after that point, I think we are then going to do sort of the as a full board afterwards, after getting these sort of recommendations for amendments, I think we're going to do sort of like a vote-a-rama for these afterwards.
For like each one?
I think each one, I mean, if we are able to bundle, but but without knowing what they are, it's very hard for me to anticipate whether or not that's feasible.
The amendments to our bylaws are code of conduct, internal operations, so part of our bylaws. say that members wishing to amend motions extensively or offer complex substitutions are encouraged to address these issues at committee meetings. If in exceptional circumstances, a member is unable to bring such matters before the appropriate committee, amendments should be prepared in writing in advance to permit informed discussion. I don't think what you're describing is exactly quite that. And so I would suggest we stick with what our bylaws.
I think that's, I mean, that's a potentially fair compromise that we say those amendments have to be submitted in writing in advance of the full board meeting, and then we will consider them as a committee of a whole to then move
And then
through each of
the
them.
second comment I would say is my understanding of Robert's rules, and I'm not sure if others agree that well, we can have
Got it
oh
right here.
my gosh, we're ready. We can make comments on the resolution and people can vote changes to say the whereas clauses as you did, but you cannot reverse through an amendment process a resolution from a committee.
That is my understanding as well, is that we cannot say to make the resolution say the opposite thing. But I did like the hypothetical, I'm still doing my research. But hypothetically, were the resolution to fail, someone could offer the opposite resolution afterwards. But you're correct, that this resolution, or whatever form it ultimately takes, cannot be amended as part of the process I am recommending to say, to change the direction of the resolution.
Yeah, I think I agree with Concur. I think the one thing that I would change is that I personally don't think we should go into a committee of the whole. Like, committees of the whole are meant to be for things to be considered outside of the regular process. This went through the regular process. It went through 2 committee meetings. It came to us yesterday. We're talking about it today. We're gonna talk about it then. And the point of a committee of the whole is to basically move away from the limits on discussion, which is, 10 minutes per person or 2 minutes per item, or two opportunities to speak per item. And I think people have had so much opportunity to speak that we do not need to go to the committee of the whole. I think we should encourage people to send in, or not even encourage, require people to send in written amendments ahead of time. And then they can make those motions from the floor and we can go through the normal process, through the normal full board process without going into the committee of the whole, because I don't think we need, anyone to speak more than twice on any amendment when they had plenty of time to do so. And will likely have had time and we're at the meeting beforehand.
So I think I slightly disagree with that. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think what Brad is proposing, so if we do not go into committee vote, then each amendment will be offered as a separate motion with a separate discussion. I think what Brad is proposing is that we can have a single discussion period followed by a series of votes, which I think would actually be far more efficient. So if we do not go into committee, I don't think we can do that. So if someone offers a motion, we go into discussion, we talk about it. Someone offers another motion, so maybe it'll be the same amount of time, but that's my concern.
I guess if we're gonna, let's say we go with the proposal to require amendments be submitted beforehand, as per our bylaws, then we'll know in advance, right? Like, we'll know if there's 1 or 2 or 3 or 70. And so at that point, we can decide, because to go into a committee of the whole, we have to vote on it. We have to vote to go into the committee of the whole.
Right.
That's just how it works. And so, if it's not that many, then maybe it is worth it to have a discussion on each item. And if it's a lot, then we could, at that point, decide to go to the committee of the whole.
I don't really want to get off this, but I just wanted to add that a lot of these issues are super technical. And so I just wanted to make sure that there's the opportunity for, members of the committee to respond to these things. There ought to be an opportunity for people that have spent the time to understand the content of the proposal to react to, to what the amendment is that's being offered.
And so does the written notice and the opportunity to comment in the committee as a whole, does that satisfy that for you?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's almost like formalizing, so you submit it in advance. But there should be an opportunity at the outset then for the, appropriate members of the committee to then respond to it. To open it up as a neutral, okay, this was offered, we're now gonna open it up to the board to respond to it. I would probably start with the reaction of the committee before we open up the discussion. Does that, if you follow, like,
You feel about that, Aaron?
Well, it's, going back to, you know, I realize our bylaws say that, so my question for that is, you know, there have been robust conversations, there's been decent participation at meetings, but, you know, there's people on the board that are gonna come to Thursday that are waiting to hear and make their thoughts and have not had the time to like craft detailed questions or comments, you know, because we haven't encouraged that in the past. We're trying to sort of keep conversation off of email and not have deliberation. And, you know, we've had robust comments from certain people, but the majority of people on this board have not necessarily been commenting about this. So I would just, my question is, how would timing on that work? Because I would be just concerned if we're saying that full amendments would have to be submitted ahead of the meeting, you know, we leave this meeting, we're 48 hours before that meeting. So how is the mechanism for people? I worry that we're not gonna have participation from people that are not able to do that, who are gonna walk into the room on Thursday, that are gonna maybe get an email tonight that says, please submit amendments to something that they haven't really been fully shown yet. I mean, and I realize we've sent stuff out, it's a little bit on everyone to sort of do their own due diligence, but as a precedent, we're gonna give people 1 day's notice to comment on the super massive important text, and then say you can't make an amendment because you haven't sent in a written thing in advance. I worry about that functionally and how the execution of that, even how that, the intention of that in our bylaws is supposed to work given the time frame we're looking at. So I just, that's my question for you is what is the intention of that flow in reality?
Yes, I mean, to that, I would say we did share the resolution has been shared with the full board as part of sort of the discussion relating to the exec process, just as that email that I sent earlier this week was long. And I sent it earlier this week. So sort of people who are interested have been given the opportunity to sort of digest the resolution itself. And so, I mean, I wish people had longer to do this, but I mean, I will be sending, if that's the route we want to go, I will be sending out this email tonight so that people have I mean, they'll have a full day and then, you know, the meeting itself to do that.
And I guess you would differentiate between like what we're considering a sizable amendment versus the standard comment or question that you would be bringing to the meeting, so that it's clear for people like what the difference is.
Yeah, it's like a threshold, I guess, sort of thing is typically we don't do amendments at the full board because it will protract the process and because, you know, we like to have that happen earlier in the process as part of the people attend the committee meetings. And this is different I think, than a friendly amendment for a typo or.
But I like to David's question. I think since we've had a team of people work on this, I think it's essential that, you know, members of the committee who work specifically, any member of the committee, but also the team that is assigned to this proposal, whatever we can do to make it easier for them to address the questions and comments in the room. So I support that idea for sure.
So then I would say to that, then I will request people to send those in advance to the board office and myself. We will collect those and then we will circulate it Thursday morning. Does that like, I don't know when to make the cutoff for this thing because I want to give people the opportunity to submit this in writing, realizing the short turnaround. I want to balance those things, but I also want to give the committee time to be able to look at those and come up with any sort of response. So is there, I mean, I'm gonna ask to put you and Julie both on the spot, like where is the cutoff for that?
We shouldn't cut off, we should allow as much time as possible.
For the people to send them in. So then,
Husband.
yeah, sure, I just want to close that, because I also want to give, if we're going to have the committee sort of respond to these amendments, I want to give the committee and the people who are the resolution time to look at them and sort of come up with that response.
It's good, it's last.
It is good, it's last, so I guess you could be doing it the entire board meeting if you would like.
But I'm sorry.
I'm gonna go to Todd and then I'll come, and then
Okay.
you're on and I'll come back to you.
Let's take a step back for a second. So this is an exceptional meeting and issue for our community board. The whole purpose, in my opinion, yes, it's true, we're bound by Robert's rules and the bylaws, but let's not lose track of the spirit and not the letter of what we're doing here. Our full board is supposed to be where all the different committees can hear from the experts and weigh their own expertise. So as an example, I'm on Parks and Public Spaces. I've also been for years on SLAP. And a lot of these issues that Janice and Julie and the committee have worked diligently on, we really haven't had a chance to weigh in on it. Now, there's no way, just seeing what happened at our exec meeting yesterday, there's no way that our 50 colleagues are going to be able to draw conclusions. They have to be educated. And yes, it's true. Our bylaws say send the stuff in advance, but that's really impractical in this exceptional case. Now, we did hear yesterday, right? I believe it was from Aaron and some other people I heard, that we can make comments one way or another until September. What is the rush to judgment on this? What I would say, I like Bradley, your original proposal. A committee of the whole will do the best we can, but our overall approach should be to broaden everybody's participation in this, even the non-experts. And what I would say is we don't know what's going to happen at that meeting. Just like when we had the issue with Joe and his proposals. I think what we will do the best we can, but everybody should be allowed to hear from the experts, ask questions, and if it turns out we can't come to a decision, then we should have a fallback decision. Let Julie and Janice and all the experts, we can have in our back pocket that will have set up some special committees that will have a deadline until August or September, and they'll be able to meet and educate and maybe formulate some of these alternative proposals. I think we should consider that and have that ready. And the other thing is, I said yesterday that we should respect what comes out of the land use committee. But you know what? This is the chance for the Parks Committee and all of our other committees to see all of these moving parts and have our say. We should not be bound or have our ability to comment restricted by a narrow reading of Robert's rules and the bylaws, when the spirit of the bylaws, in my practical experience, we've had big issues come for us before, and where necessary, we took the time. I just think that generally the idea that we have to do this in 4 days, it's just not going to happen. We're going to need more time than we have.
So 2 things on that. I mean, I hear your point that and I think I share it, that we are trying to broaden this up so that as many members of our community board are able to weigh in on this issue because it is so important. But I do think that unfortunately we are bound by the schedule on this, and I don't want to point fingers, so I'm not going to, but in terms of why that schedule is the way it is, but we will not have another opportunity as a full board to weigh in on this. The timing of our full board meeting in September is after the period of comment. So if we do not weigh in at this coming full board meeting, we will not have the opportunity to do so.
I would simply say this: there's the rules and there's what you say in public. Aaron, I had a discussion with Aaron that what we put out, even after the deadlines, given the fact that we're Community Board 5, is going to have an impact. Especially if we use the bully pulpit and make sure that we're heard. That's all I have to say.
You're on.
So I just want to make sure we're really clear about what we're talking about. No one is talking about limiting comments. No one is talking about limiting questions. No one is talking about limiting input. We're talking about a very specific avenue of things, which are amendments, and how we're going to handle the amendments. And we typically don't anticipate a lot of amendments, so we don't anticipate needing a process for them. I will say, as the secretary of this board, there is no way that I can live edit the document if 20 amendments are kind of like flying at me at the time. So having them pre-submitted is essential. It's also essential to make it clear what an amendment is. An amendment is on line so-and-so, I want to add this or remove this. It is specific textual language or deletion. It is not, I would like to add something about this. That's not the properly offered amendment. So I don't think it's unreasonable, even from a logistical perspective, to have them pre-submitted so we can have the document open, we can know what we're talking about. We just saw what happens with the letter with Bex. Like when you try to live edit a document as a body, it is very challenging. I don't think anyone is advocating as a community board, we should be live drafting a resolution with 50 people in the room. I think that would be absolute chaos. So again, we are not talking about limiting comment. We're not talking about not hearing from experts. We're simply talking about amendments and how they will be handled. And I think what you propose is great because, and I think getting them in advance is crucial for the simple logistics of knowing what we're actually talking about. And I think we do need to emphasize to people when you solicit for amendments, what is an amendment? An amendment is specific deletions or insertions. It is not generalized desires of what you want it to say.
I don't have anything else to add.
Yeah, so I just wanted to comment that even in other boards for public hearing, that they ask people to submit the comments via a Google form. But I want to balance that and, and I think what I even said, I'm the new assistant secretary over here trying to figure out what are we talking about? So what I said to Yaren was, you get 2 minutes in my book, you get 50 words in the minutes. It kind of, that, and I'm talking just about public hearing comments, but I think it also moves to discuss the balance, that the secretary has a role to receive those comments with the chair and the office staff. And that if a board member felt like they couldn't, for some reason, get it together to write something, that they could call somebody, that they could, in the spirit of, we all have different skill sets, we all don't have the savvy. So if someone needs help, that there is help available, that you don't have to be, an attorney or someone who does this. The other part of this is that the conversation around moving us out of silos, we just keep talking about that we're not sending letters as committees, but as full boards. And so it's important for us to be able to move out of part, you see this all the time. The dynamics in parks have a different slant than when they come through a different committee. I can't get the other committees together. Right, that's, or my point is that there's tremendous cross-section. And so that you want to be able to have some of that dynamic conversation informing the work that has been really laid forward for us to consider. So that's all.
So I agree with a number of comments, including what Yaron said. I think when you have controversial matters, that's when you have to look to the rules, because there's going to be disagreements and you need to come up with a fair process to do things. And our rules spell it out. I think the process that you outlined with the additions coming from our bylaws and Robert's rules is a fair way to do it. You're going to let anyone comment who wants to comment. They've had multiple opportunities to comment up to now. You will still have every opportunity to comment if you'd like. If you want to do a specific text change, an amendment, you can follow these rules. And so I think your process is fine. I'd be happy to make a motion to adopt the process that you propose.
Yes, I don't know that I need that to do this, but
okay,
I appreciate it. I just want to hear the perspectives before I sort of set them.
I think it's a good idea.
But what do you, Julie? I do kind of want to, I think we're sort of circling on this, so I do want to hear.
I would love to get all the amendments beforehand, but the idea of limiting somebody's voice when they finally figured out the discussion that's going on worries me. And like, maybe we can do a balance where we appreciate as much as possible send your amendment, but if there's some that come out after the discussion, we let that happen, especially if it's really significant.
To balance that. And we have to, I don't know, could you read that portion of our the bylaws again, just to be clear?
Okay, it says, members wishing to amend motions extensively or offer complex substitutions are encouraged to address these issues at committee meetings. At committee meetings. But if in exceptional circumstances, a member is unable to bring such matters before the appropriate committee, amendments should be prepared in writing in advance to prepare informed discussion and voting at the full board.
Can we finish this, the rest of it?
Yes. It is to be understood that these rules are not to prevent in any way full discussion of any matter, but rather to guarantee members the opportunity for meaningful deliberation. That's why we have that rule.
I would argue that the clause that permits general discussion would allow these amendments, because part of having, I speak from experience, part of having the full board is your deliberations and your decisions and how you will vote is altered by hearing these things. So you have to have a balance.
I think it's the minor versus major that comes out here, right? So if it's a major change, you should be able to pull that together and send it in advance.
Yes.
If it's minor, if it comes up in the course of the discussion, then by all means, offer it up. Great.
It's a friendly amendment.
I think friendly amendments would still be permitted as they typically are for the minor ones, but it's the major that we're talking about, major striking a whereas clause or we can't reverse, but like adding stipulations. I think that's where we're trying to capture in advance so that we have a process. We're not at Xavier, but we don't want to be there all night, so. Go ahead, Derek.
So, I mean, that's what I was sort of gonna say. As chair of this committee, of that committee, friendly amendments, the acceptance of what is considered a friendly amendment to the resolution that we're proposing to the board has always been sort of a little bit discretion of the chair who's presenting this resolution. So I guess saying it out loud for the whole room, like we would still accept friendly amendments on the floor. And as the chair, it's the discretion of like what is in scope or what is out of scope in terms of, like what Julie was saying, as part of the discussion that happens, things are going to come up that have not been addressed due to new information or new deliberation. I think that's really important. Like people are there's gonna be things come up that are gonna spark comments that they wouldn't have thought of in advance because they're related to what Todd was saying, they're related to the conversation. And I think that could spark amendments and friendly amendments or potentially amendments that aren't friendly. So we just, there is gotta be some discretion there, which I think we're saying. So I support that process and I get it. We're trying to limit a little bit, but I think we just need to have the ability to have amendments based on what comes up in the discussion, and they can be judged friendly or not friendly, and they can be judged out of scope by the chair and not allowed to be suggested. But I that's how I've seen our full boards work in the past.
Yeah, though I would say that the friendly amendments typically are like they're edits.
There's been non-friendly things suggested that were not allowed because they were appropriate or not friendly.
Yeah, and I think probably the line I would draw is a typo change or sort of a line edit is one thing where you're saying, you meant to say this, but you said the opposite, or you did type as a typo or something like that, right? Or the vote's wrong or something like that. But I think if we're changing the substance, like adding a condition, I think should not be considered a friendly amendment in this process, because I think that is what the written portion is meant to capture.
Sure.
Does that seem?
I would agree with that.
Do we plan to use unanimous consent at all during this process?
I believe we are allowed to. The bylaws committee question, which we'll get to soon. I feel like we're circling in on the process that we're going to go with the written comments in advance. I will send an email tonight reminding people also what an amendment is so that they can be very clear about that. say we will still have the normal process of questions and comments, but if you would like to prepare a major amendment, which is, revisions to the resolution, please submit those in advance, in writing, to myself, to Iran, to Catherine, and to the office, so that we have that sort of all captured. And then we will do a committee we will function as a committee of a whole. That's the one where I remain chair.
As a committee, as if in a committee.
As if in a committee of a whole. Just to keep things, moving along, I don't want to put musical chairs. We will then have a comment period for all of those potential amendments, however many come in. And then we will do a series of votes coming out of that process on each of the amendments.
And what is our backup? We can't, if there's big disagreement or we can't come to any resolution, are we gonna cut it off at a fixed time and have, an alternative process in place?
We mean in the hypothetical where the amendments make it so that we do not get a majority on the ultimate resolution, is that?
No, we just run out of time. Let's say we get like a dozen amendments and they're sitting there endlessly and they're throwing us out at 9:30.
They're not.
They're not.
We're at Amazon, so we're there as long as we want.
So we're gonna be there as long as.
Forever.
You can also, you can direct conversation. You people can call the question. Yeah, you have to be respectful of
Yeah,
people's schedules.
I guess the last thing is, when we're functioning as if in a committee of whole, I would think that we would probably want to limit the amount of time based on the number of amendments so that we can kind of keep this moving. So that we are not there all night long. But I know it's important, so I don't want to set an arbitrarily short deadline, but I do want to make sure that we have some sort of framework.
I think that's wise because you also silence people if you have meetings that go on all night. People have obligations, people have family care obligations. It's not fair to everyone to do that. It's as unfair to do that as it is to say that people haven't had a chance to.
Charles, do you still have?
Yeah, I'm just just a bit concerned as a blind person. I'm just wondering how, these amendments, are they for everyone to chime in on? I'm just wondering what the process should be for me as, with the visual disability. I'm wondering if there could be a way that maybe, I don't mean to put the two members on the spot, but maybe the chair of the land use committee or Julie, sorry, I do apologize. I can't remember if you're vice chair, so I apologize for that. But maybe the chair or vice chair or someone from the land use could go through the housing of yes resolution with me, and maybe, I don't know if they would like to take down my thoughts, or if, hopefully I shouldn't have any amendments, but who knows, right? But I'm just wondering if there's some process that we could think of with the visual disability. And I just want to say, I definitely agree with my fellow board member, Encore, about, trying not to drag on comments too much. I do believe in the bylaws. I thought that in business session, I don't know if it counts to the full board meetings, but I thought members are meant to have 3 minutes apiece to give comments. I'm not too sure if that's accurate or not. But again, if someone could help me with the amendments and how to submit them, and if there's a way to get a receipt from the board office that it's, that they did receive the amendment, that'd be great. Thanks.
So yeah, to the resolution, it's been shared previously and I will likely share it again. I will share it again tonight in my email, just so everyone knows sort of where we are, what the thing is that we're potentially amending, which is a PDF, which I believe should be readable. As it goes to the amendments, I think it's probably fair that we read them aloud as they come up in the board rather than requiring people to read them. Just so that we are all clear on what we're voting on. In which case that should hopefully allow you to comment thoughtfully on the amendments as they come up in the full board, in that as it's been a committee of a whole. And if you have amendments yourself, you can definitely reach out to, I'm not sure who to offer, Aaron or Julie or the board office to sort of take in any amendments that you would like to offer as part of this process.
Yeah, they can reach out to me, Nancy, Julie.
Sure. So you can reach out to Aaron, Nancy, or Julie if you have amendments to that resolution that comes up, to have them submitted as part of this process.
Oh, and one last thing, I do apologize, Chair, I'll be really quick. Just in the future, thinking, this might be a little bit off topic, but if there's a way that we could think of maybe a committee that deals with outreach to people who are low income. You know, I mentioned before in the past, I feel like there's a great big section of our district that needs affordable housing that might not have the ways to reach out to us. I'm just wondering if we can work on some ways, maybe through churches or soup kitchens or something, to try to gather people's feelings on this very important topic of housing for yes. I'm just wondering if there's something that maybe there's a little project we could do during the summer, or get together and try to get as many voices till the September deadline. I just don't know. I really hope we could do something, because I really feel this is an important step in our city, and I really feel like there is a voice that's been unheard because they might not have the know-how or the ways to reach out or even be aware. And I wish the city would have done a better job at publicizing or doing better outreach through different media sources and the media itself on this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. All right, are we ready to move to the next agenda item? Oh, sorry, Marisa.
Just a quick sort of logistical question. Do you want to leave the reso package in the order that it's in? And leave city yes at the end, for the last discussion?
I think that's probably best, because I think that will maybe incentivize people to move to the other ones more quickly, and also City of Yes is going to take such a large period of time, I think, to interrupt the rest of the meeting to do this.
And then in terms of asking for amendments, I feel like people will need line numbers. We don't have it right now because we're missing some resolution. So,
The,
you know,
the
so-
standalone PDF has them.
Yeah,
so-
so I mean, I guess that's what you should be
In reference
sending
to.
around, and have them reference those line numbers, and
we'll
then
just transpose.
we'll figure out how to do that on this end.
To help with that, if you want, I can help you set up like a Google form to receive everything.
I would love that.
Okay, yeah, and then it'll be easy to.
Great.
Auto-populate.
Yeah.
I just want to quickly, one recommendation and one just red flag. So recommendation, when you ask for the amendments, can you just make it clear that we're not like soliciting amendments? Like, we're not encouraging amendments.
If you have them now, please.
Right, and then also, one thing, along with the category of friendly amendments, we also just need to be aware of, there may be amendments that occur as a result of an amendment once it's voted on. So, you know, there might be the domino effect, in other words, so we just need to be aware of that, like an amendment passes, that leads to another one, so just, we need to think about that.
That someone wants to introduce one. If something that
Based
someone
on what
submitted in writing passes, then someone,
Wants to amend.
as a result of that.
Not, or that there is gonna be a cascading effect that because that amendment, because that piece was changed, another piece has to change with, like, I mean, it starts getting complicated.
Same lines.
And amendments that hit the same line, but we can deal with all of that. It's gonna be really great to see them in advance, for the most part. I know some may come.
Sorry, yeah,
Some people already sent their comments.
I will ask them to reset those, because I want to start the clock today rather than have it be.
They have to be like amendments, like this line number, not.
That's what I said.
like,
Yes, I think we got a mix of that, but yeah, I think, yes.
Brad, could I,
Yeah.
before moving on, can I ask if we could move the budget item up? I think it's very quick, the budget and treasure, but I have to leave a little early. So-
Sure. Yeah, does anyone have any issue with doing the budget first? No? All right, go ahead.
Okay, great. So, two items on the budget very quickly. First, I wanted to get everyone's feedback on how to prepare our annual budget and quarterly statements. So if we look at sections 3G2 and G3 of our bylaws, we're supposed to have an annual budget and quarterly statements of our finances available to the executive committee. And so I would propose the following, unless anyone has any objections. I think we should make sure that the budget and quarterly statements are also available to the full board. These meetings are public, so I don't understand why, I think there's no objection to having that available to the full board if it's available here. Two, the quarters close in March, June, September, December, so I propose that our quarterly statements be available right in the month right after the quarters close. So the first one would be October, and we could just go quarterly like that. And then an annual budget perhaps presented in September. We have August off. And we receive new funds in early July, as Marisa has already started sending us. So then we could have an annual budget presented for the board in September. Does that all sound reasonable to people?
Just to be clear, all of these presentations are happening just to exec. I mean, the materials potentially will be more broadly available, but these are all happening exclusively at exec.
That's right. The presentation's at exec, but the materials should be available because exec is open to the public.
Okay. Are there any comments or questions about that process? Okay, great. Great, thank you. Yaron just left the room. Is there one more item?
Well, do you want to know about the final funds from last from the 2024? Marisa, you can also speak to this if I have anything wrong, but my understanding is our 24 budget, which just closed, we had originally budgeted a total of $282,000. Our total expenditure was $263,000, although that does not count a final cycle of payroll because payroll is biweekly. So the ultimate surplus was approximately $6,800. The $6,800 has been spent on upgrades of these owls because we have received much comment that it's hard to hear people when you're dialing in, and a certain prepayment of website expenses because you have to use the money or it reverts to the city if you don't use it by I believe July 1st. So.
And then we also prepaid, which maybe segues nicely, we prepaid Robin for the rescheduled team building event. So we've done a lot of prepaying now so that we have a little bit more of a cushion next year, I guess this year. When we all know the budget will be a bit tighter.
Yeah, question. I know that for the George James contract, it was like it was hourly up to a certain amount of money. I think the cap was $5,000. How much did we end up spending? Like how many hours and like how much money did that?
Question.
I think, I'm sorry, I don't have it right in front of me, but I think it was something like 40.
Oh, basically.
It's very, very close to the max.
Thank you.
Oh, and then I guess the final thing, speaking of budgets and contracts, as folks know, we had a contract with HDC for the Pen Clip project, and there was an anonymous donation given to them. We don't know who they are. Our agreement with HDC says that acknowledgements that are given to donors with respect to any donations related to Pen Clip, a copy of that acknowledgement has to be handed over to us. So I believe we can ask them and we can get more information about what that was, because I know that has been a question that's been raised. That's what I'm planning to do.
All the money.
People have asked. I don't know.
Okay, back to regularly scheduled. So Yaron, could you give us an update on the team building event task?
Sure. So I talked to Brad and some other folks, and there is a desire to keep the team building event as was planned. There was concern that doing it in the summer would have low attendance, which I think is fair. So we are targeting September, specifically the week of September 16th, which is the week after our September full board meeting. The facilitator is available that week. Todd has indicated that the space has availability. We have already made some purchases of items, which are in that room right there, which would go over, and then we would reorder the food, and Robin is available as she was, and it can all proceed, as was planned.
Are there any questions, any comments, any concerns? Okay. All right, moving on to the discussion of the bylaws task force.
Sure. So I think as we all know, the bylaws are 12 years overdue for a deep scrub and review. And so Brad and I have been doing some initial chats on potential approaches to tackle this. So we think that we would want to select a small group of hardworking individuals to like drive this forward after doing an open call, folks to put their name forward. And then have those groups or those individuals have or offer open forums for board members to come in and raise specific items that they would want us to address. And then we have a defined list of everything that we're looking to tackle as we approach the bylaws, and then distribute the decision points amongst the members of the working group, task force, whatever you want to call it, and then do some peer analysis of how other community boards have tackled each of those decision points. So, you know, perhaps there are other community boards in Manhattan, would be our peer set, and then have that group convene, walk through the results, and come up with recommendations for how to tackle those items, and then have an open forum available to the full board to walk through those open items and the recommendations and solicit thoughts both in that open forum and over a survey going out to the community board, and then have that working group again, come together, figure out the final recommendations, and then submit it to the board office in accordance with our bylaws. We basically have to notice the proposed revisions to the board for 2 full board sessions, or 2 full board sessions ahead of when we vote on it. And then convene and vote on the revisions. I think ideally, you know, depending on how wide varied they are, like if we could have the changes bucketed to, if there are contentious items, like we could have those be standalone votes, and then have like the non-controversial items be tackled together. We could even talk about tackling some non-controversial items like voting earlier in the process that could actually make the subsequent bylaw votes be much easier. Like if you're able to vote virtually over an app, then we can like do line by line changes, say, I want to do this and not do this, not to roll call for every vote, which right now is a required process. But yeah, that's the way we're thinking of how to tackle this. I think the intention is for Brad to announce the formation of this group at the upcoming meeting and ask for folks to reach out to him, and then he would appoint some representatives who would get to work. And the goal is like for us to start the work in this summer lull, so that way we can like hit the ground running come September.
Yeah, and thank you, Tristan. Tristan's done a lot of kind of good thinking for the initial process of this and kind of getting this off the ground. And I think it's, I think there's a lot of appetite for us to take a look at this again, just make sure that our bylaws are working for us as part of this process. And so, like Tristan said, I said earlier, it'll be part of my chair's report that I'll be soliciting people who are interested in doing this. We are going to be looking for people who are sort of have that proven track record of doing some work. So a little bit more experience on the board is also, I think, helpful in the consideration so that they have some experience with the bylaws and how they functioned. I think we were also potentially targeting, maybe hoping to get some lawyers on this process as well. So that's going to be sort of drafting some legalese associated with it. So I guess at this point, are there any questions?
2 questions. 1, how many people, just out of curiosity, and 2, I guess more importantly, one piece that I didn't hear in your laying out the process is by what mechanism, as we've seen recently, we need this sometimes, by what mechanism will we determine whether certain proposals that we may or may not have in the bylaws are like legal or not, right? So we've needed this step recently with resolutions, and is that built into the process?
Yeah, so in terms of the size, like I proposed to Brad 5 of like board members, because I think if you have too many people, then as you saw in like those resolution groups, it really just turned into a totally open forum and not so productive, but still offering a lot of opportunities for folks to get involved and attend and offer their views. So even though it's like 5 folks working on it or charged with it, offering opportunities to everyone to like attend these open forums and like identify decision points and offer their views. And then for your second item, I think the peer analysis is going to be very helpful. For example, with the ethics committee, like, you know, I don't think they said that was illegal, but like we're to review the other community boards and we'll be like, okay, none of the 12 other Manhattan community boards have an ethics committee, like there's probably a reason why. And I think when we're determining like the decision points or coming up with recommendations for the decision point, like the legality can drive
Or
part of
just in
that.
violation of city charter, I shouldn't.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
like
yeah,
that, there's some mechanism by which we're looking
Yeah,
at
yeah,
that.
like we definitely would not want to propose anything that violates the city charter or state law or anything.
Right,
And as a
I
stopgap
guess
to
so,
that,
like,
that is
this one,
explicitly spelled out in our bylaws,
Yeah,
that, you know, like,
exactly.
obviously, we don't wanna offer
Right.
ones that are in violation, but if they are, we have a
Right.
specific provision in our bylaws that prevents them from being selected.
I guess the follow-up there is, will an independent set of eyes at any point be looking at these filings and weighing in?
Outside of the community board in
Correct.
general. That's a good,
Fair question.
That's a good recommendation.
So I just have a couple of comments. First of all, having been on many other boards where they've done bylaw changes, it's absolutely critical that the bylaw changes that you consider not be conflated with any current hot political topics, and that it's just a good government issue. So we have a lot of new people here. You know, the sort of good governance issues like we don't have enough time during the summer, and you know, when we have our board elections, we all know that those things need to be changed. But some of the other issues that might come up, it's like we just have to use our good horse sense and, you know, stay away from those. As far as the issue of who's judging it, right? So it's, if you think of the city charter as our constitution, the constitution and our enabling legislation, you know, obviously you're going to get different opinions from people, but again, it's just kind of, a lot of it is common sense. And Bradley, what I would do is make sure you have some good lawyers, but not too many lawyers, right? Because lawyers are known to differ. And good judgment is not something that's confined to lawyers. A big part of a community board is understanding the politics of how community boards work. And the lay person's opinions and how your new rules are gonna work can be as important, if not more important, than the lawyers.
Tristan, I was curious if you had spoken to any of the other like chairs of, I might have missed it once about chairs of other community boards that have recently done bylaw changes to get their feedback on how they went about it. I know
Yeah.
CB7 did, CB2, CB3, they've all had bylaw changes more recently than we have, which was 12 years ago. So they might have some useful insight.
Yeah, no, we did not, I did not think that.
I just want to say, speaking of the city charter, it's under revision and there are ongoing meetings around the city, not that it relates specifically to our bylaws, but speaking of the city charter, there is a city charter revision process now in progress in the city of New York. And so those meetings are open to the public and we have yet another meeting to attend. I don't know that it's on our agenda, but it's worth, while we're talking about bylaws, to just mention that the city charter is under review and revision process.
Thank you. Charles.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, Chair, I'm trying not to talk too long. I just want to say this is great. I really do think that the bylaws need to be updated, especially for board members and maybe like myself who are blind and maybe future ones who from the blind community might want to serve on a community board. We definitely need to think about accessibility, about people with disabilities, and I hope that my fellow board member Tristan wouldn't mind having me on his committee to talk about these updated bylaws and try to look into this, especially from someone with a a visual disability. And I just want to quickly thank yourself, Chair, and all the other former chairs who have really made me feel accommodated. I know this is a bit of a nuance to the CB5 having someone with a visual disability, so thank you very much. And to all the committee chairs also for working with me and trying to really go above and beyond to make sure I have equal access to everything. And, you know, so I do want to say thank you for that. So if I could be a part of that conversation, that would be great. And I really think this is a great opportunity for us. So thank you very much.
Anything else on this item before we move to the next one? Right. Discussion on the process for issuing letters. So I wanted to talk about this. So as sort of the context of this is I signed that letter earlier this week about the timing of the City of Yes. And I think there was some, while there was no substantive concerns about it, there were sort of concerns about sort of what is our process. It's not clear. It's changed a little bit back and forth over the times over the past year and probably before then. So I wanted to be kind of clear about the way that I'm thinking about it and sort of hear how others feel about it, which is essentially, first and foremost, if a letter can come in terms of timing and sort of substance from the full board, that is my preference. So if it comes out of a committee and then is ultimately voted on by the full board and it has the weight of the full board behind that resolution, because that is when I think the letter is strongest and carries the most weight, that is my preference. I understand, however, that sometimes timing doesn't allow that. We have limited comment periods on certain items, or like in the case of the letter that I sent earlier this week, we had a day, so it wasn't even time for an exec committee to sort of come together and vote on it. And so should timing be an issue, I think I have no issue with items coming out of our committees or you know, I will always try to consult the executive committee, but I won't necessarily have time to secure a vote for that item. But then, you know, the signature of the letter should be appropriately done. So if it's coming just out of FEX, it should say the Manhattan Community 5 Budget Education City Services Committee, not Manhattan Community Board 5, because it does not speak to the voice of the full board. So that is kind of broadly speaking how I want to do this, so that we basically, letters always go as far as they possibly can in this process, but I want to recognize that the partners that we work with don't always give us the adequate time to go through our full process. And I do not want to deprive us of our voice in these letters with that in mind. So I'll open it up to questions or comments, and I'll go, Todd, you're on here.
Fred, you have it exactly right. The only thing I could say, in addition, yes, you should always, to the extent that you have time, you should always try to get it from the board or run it by the board or have the board approve it. Where that's not possible, in extremis or there is exigencies, then you do the best you can. But the only thing I would say, the only thing I might differ with you in a little bit is in my experience over the years, there were many times where like I got a call, give us a draft letter tomorrow, right? And, you know, because I was on this task force or that task force, and I drafted it and gave it to them, and it just went out, you know, under the full board's imprimatur because of timing or exigency or whatever. And why did they do that? They were not concerned with or trying to have deniability that it was from like you know, the Open Restaurants Task Force, right? All they cared about was that it had to get out and they wanted it to have the maximum impact. And I was okay. I didn't need pride of authorship, and it would often go out unchanged. And then, you know, Nick or Craig or Clayton would go up and say, well, here's the letter that went out. It was an emergency. And more often than not, people just approved it.
And one thing I do want to note, which you bring up, which is sometimes those letters are also directly related to things we've previously decided. So I can take an example. A few months ago, the Crown Building came up for request for evaluation. We had previously written a resolution that said we support the landmarking of the Crown Building. And so with that resolution that sort of passed by our board, I wrote a letter as the chair then of landmarks saying we support this because we had explicitly said that in a resolution. And so in those cases, I do not believe sort of any of this process is necessary. We've already gone through the whole process. And so a letter that states the position of the resolution is sort of, I think, fully appropriate and does not require sort of additional approval as it has already gone through that process.
Yeah, the more controversial, the more you want people to report. The more routine or the more settled, then you're good.
To questions or areas. One, this came up yesterday. Can we settle this sort of question about oral versus written comment? So, back with Green Fast Track in March, we had a letter that bypassed full board vote because the deadline to give oral comment or verbal comment was before the full board, but the deadline to give written comments after full board. And at the time, the perspective of leadership was that verbal comment is very, very important. Therefore, we're gonna bypass full board and we're gonna give a comment. Yesterday, we made the opposite decision. We said that verbal comment is not essential and it's not. So can we like decide that? I mean, what is the decision of this committee, to this board, of the importance of verbal comment? And because I've gotten mixed signals, like historically, it's like, well, it's much more important to give it orally. It sounds like DCP has said it doesn't matter how you give it. So like, what is our perspective?
You mean like at a hearing?
Correct. So we have, in some cases, we're going to give comment at a hearing. This is what happened with Green Fast Track. We bypass, even though written comment would have still been accepted, we bypass a full board vote in order to give oral comment at a hearing. Are we saying that that is an emergency? That's what I want.
Can I speak to that issue?
Okay.
Okay.
Well, Brad, can you
Okay.
recognize you?
Yeah.
I cannot recognize you.
Oh, sorry.
I can speak to that issue.
That was settled.
Having spoken under extremis at a number of city council sessions and hearings where they change the rules. In other words, you literally are there and they'd say you have 2 minutes. No, you have 1 minute. Oh, submit in writing before. You have 3 pages, then you have 2 pages. It's like the way I have always viewed it, and Samir knows this, right? It's like the way I've always viewed it is whatever time, if you're authorized by the community board to speak on behalf of the board, like a public hearing, it's like you take no chances. If you have 3 pages, you write 3
Right,
pages.
but my
If you have
question is,
1
under
minute-
what circumstances do we authorize someone to speak on behalf of the board if it's before a full board meeting? The question is like, under what circumstances do we allow that? Because this has been not consistent.
Oh, you have to be delegated.
Yeah, I mean,
No, we understand that.
yes, but I think that the question he's asking is, how am I thinking about that delegation? And I think I would still sort of keep that same process where I would like to get as much sort of approval as possible, but if there is, a strong push for a public spoken comment, I think I would, talk to the executive committee and see, does this feel like an appropriate time? Like, it felt like yesterday, the opinion was that, if we do a spoken today or written in 2 days, not a big deal, but I can't guarantee that that's sort of the case.
So it would be
always.
case by case.
It's case by
That's
case,
fine.
yeah.
Usually it's done in consultation with the chairs of the committee. Like when I did it, it was like the chairs of my committee spoke with the chair. And then they said, oh, well, Todd or whomever, they're the ones that would do it and they would delegate to us.
Exactly.
And we did what we had to do.
Yeah.
My second question is about the distinction between a letter and a resolution. This is something that'd be great. We don't have to solve it tonight, but if something, I understand a letter can come from a committee, a resolution, this can't, if it's not being voted on by full board. I think clarification on if something is being voted on by the full board, in what circumstances would it be in the form of a letter? And in what circumstances would it be in the form of a resolution? And it'd be great to get clarity on that. Again, we don't have to do that tonight, but I think that is a question that actually a lot of members.
Yeah, I mean, my initial thoughts on that is that they come from sort of different things. As resolutions are typically the more routine actions that we take. It's a response to a request for evaluation. It's a response to a permit application. It's sort of like, these are the rote items that we do. Whereas like, I'll go back to landmarks for that same letter. We wrote a letter rather than a resolution because this is sort of an out of the normal process. And so a letter gives us a little bit more freedom to express those ideas rather than it being something kind of the typical reactionary process that we do with our resolutions. And I think that sort of relates right into maybe some of these other ones, like maybe the next one that came up today, is that it's gives us a little bit more freedom in terms of structure.
Yeah, I think what you're saying about, if you're already authorized because there was a full board vote, that sounds great. I want to discuss what is the statute of limitations on that. We have like in the past re-upped resolutions that were voted on over a decade ago and said like this is still the vote from the board, even though there may be like 3 members who are still on the board that were on the board when it was voted in the first place. So like, do you have a thought on like, is it like a year, is it 2 years, zero, like months, like, what is the timeline that you will feel comfortable saying this is still the position of the board?
I mean, my position is generally speaking that like, once we have decided it, it is our prerogative to come back and change our decision, but unless we do so, that does still remain the position of the board. However, I do understand that like, a position from 20 years ago may not necessarily reflect the position of the board today. So I'm open to people's considerations on that, but I think, that one's also a little bit harder. It's kind of a case by case because, if it's, I don't know, we don't like nuclear war, like that's an easy thing. We said 20 years ago, we can say again now, but like, it might not be the same. And I don't know that I have a tangible example of how to set that line, because it feels a little bit
I think for
arbitrary.
me, the hard part, like with the letter versus, or with the, is an emergency being case by case, I think that is easier because it's a case by case in the sense it's the executive committee deciding together. But if it's something that you're just signing a letter because it's already something that's pre-authorized by the board, there's no real discussion to decide that case by case. So at least what I would propose is like, we pick a number of years, maybe 1 or 2, because those are like terms. And we just say like, that's like, if it's older than that, you have to bring it back. You can't just, you can obviously decide whatever you want to do, but I would consider saying like 2 years. If something's older than 2 years, like it's not appropriate for us to assume that would still be the position on the board if we were to vote on it again today.
That's fair. 2 to me does feel sort of low because that is going to be, we are going to be coming back to the board a lot for decisions because things in the city take that. I would be thinking just off the cuff, I'm thinking, our new mandate is that the board is going to turn over every 8 years. So maybe 8 is the number. But I'm open to there's thoughts. Julie.
I think it depends on the subject matter. Some things are more urgent than others.
I think Samir's point is that that process for something that we already have a resolution on doesn't need to involve a broader group. It's essentially the chairs of the relevant committees and the chair of the board. And so that means that we can always bring things to exec as sort of a test case or to be safe, but I think he's saying like if we're saying that's allowed, for how long?
How many of those letters like go out like per month or per year? Like if it's about how much?
I don't think I wrote one in my entire 10 years.
Yeah, I'm
as
just
chair,
wondering
vice
about
chair,
like the
but
volume and stuff, and then
you speak to that.
I think that would speak to having it not be as bad if it needs to be reviewed again.
More letters went out than so I think there are, it does happen. They're just timing issues and there are.
But specifically one speaking to like the Crown Building one as an example of like.
Right,
how many of that sort go out?
There's quite a bit. I would say, I don't know what quite,
20,
5 or,
50?
no, like under 10.
Oh.
But.
Per year.
Per year.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that's a lot. It sort of depends on
every letter needs to be voted on by some body, right? Whether it's the committee or the full board. So wouldn't you know if people disagreed with it or not?
No,
What
these
we're
are ones
saying-
that aren't being voted.
These are ones that are not being voted on when the letter is written because they are based on a resolution that's been previously.
Oh, okay, so like
no one sees them,
So-
they just go out.
They just go out because
That's why we
they
don't know
are
that they
because
voted.
they are
They're the
fully
position of
consistent.
the
They're the
board.
position of the.
They're the
Right.
stated
Got it,
position of the board.
Because what I'm trying to balance here is sort of the efficiency, the productivity, so that we're not
Yeah.
constantly having to revisit issues in order to write letters and to have our voice sort of be heard on these things. So if there are non-controversial items that, even if they are a decade old, they still are sort of like the position of the board. I can't think of one off the top of my head because it's late, it's been a long day, but that being the thing is that to me seems like a good process so that we can kind of keep things moving. But I do hear your concern about,
We can pick a number and then.
Can we
I'll
split the
just-
difference between 2 and 8, say 5?
4.
That's not splitting the two.
So I'd say 5 sounds fair. We'll say, so if a resolution is older than 5 years, well, I think the process is we'll go to exec and say, does anyone have any concerns about a letter being issued based on this resolution?
Maybe one other piece of feedback, just like for transparency's sake, for example, this letter that I was referring to that was re-upped 20 years later. That was not, no one was made aware of that on exec. So maybe whenever we do send a letter, regardless of if it's, 1 year old or 5 years old, just if we could just put it on the exec agenda, saying like, we sent this letter, just FYI.
Yeah.
That's it. Just no discussion, just that's it.
It happened.
Yeah.
That seems fair to me.
Do we actually have, other than bylaws, do we have any kind of operating rules or?
We're all flying by the seat of our pants on this. We could.
Hey, Tristan.
voluntary check. Yourself.
All right. Any other items on letters before we move to our final, second to the last item of the evening? Thank you all for staying. Appreciate it. Statement of norms. So I'm gonna turn this over to Samir, if that's all right with you. This is sort of your baby.
Yeah, so when I was chair for a short period of time, I had talked to a bunch of other chairs at other community boards. And, a lot of them have had similar issues to the ones we've had about decorum or respect and all this kind of stuff. It was common on CB7, it was a little bit more common on CB4. So I was asking how they dealt with it. And one of the things that I got specifically from the chair of CB4, Jessica, is that they started making a statement of norms before every meeting that just was basically reiterated what's in the bylaws, like we are going to treat members with respect. We are gonna be, fair. We're gonna do all this stuff. It's really short, just like 4 or 5 sentences. And at least what she told me is that it's really set the tone for the meetings to just have a consistent reminder that, we're here as volunteers, we're doing our best. You're not here to question people's motives. And I think it would be a good idea for us to adopt something similar, both for our full board meetings, but every committee meeting as well, because I know some of us were in the room during the land use meeting and that got a little bit heated. And perhaps, having this statement of norms beforehand, reminding everyone what we all agreed to in our bylaws would help lower the temperature of it.
I love that. I think that's great. I think also it avoids what has become increasingly common and annoying, which is what will the bylaws say, and no one likes that. No one likes having to do that. And so it sets it up front. I think it's great. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah. I mean, I'll jump in now, which is, I have no issue with that, and I think it potentially could be helpful. I would like to structure it a little bit differently than what you sent, which is, I don't think we need to read the bylaws to people because they exist and they're not violating them because they don't know they exist or because they can't read it. It's like it's a different thing. I personally really like the way that Renee begins all of her Bex meetings. I wish she were here to sort of share that because she has a script of essentially, everyone's opinion here is valued and we want to hear from everyone and that kind of thing. I think that is sort of more the tone that I'd like to take. That's like positive and uplifting, rather than saying, don't question other people's motives and that kind of thing. I don't know. That's just me.
It can also always change. So we can start with one and if,
support we get.
I could just say something.
Yeah, absolutely, Todd.
It's the lack of norms that is destroying our public debate. But you have to strike a balance between patronizing and preaching at people, which is not a good look, and common sense. So that's easier said than done. And the longer you're on the board, the more you know the norms without them having to be told you, except when they're breached, in which case you're horrified. So, Samir, I think it's a worthy effort, but I wouldn't go so far as to read it before every meeting. Just talk about it informally and give the committee chairs discretion as to how they want to do it. And, that's the best we can do.
I strongly disagree. I think the whole point of a statement of norms is to make it very explicit and to say it. We don't say it maybe in front of the committee meetings, but I definitely think it should be read out more or less exactly the same every time, not just like a vague, vibes approach. I think it should be something like a script that we read at the top of every full board meeting.
I like that idea, especially in that it's like a positive, like setting the, it is setting a positive vibe, but I like that it's a script, the same way that the head of every, public hearing, there's a very specific script of exactly how it's gonna work and who gets time, and then we do this. And I think that that is a great way to just, it's a reminder for everyone who already knows it to just come in with like a full heart.
So moving this forward, if you want to take this on as sort of potentially taking a first draft with some of the comments that we've heard today, and maybe we'll discuss it at the next exec, which will be in September.
Sure.
So
Yeah, that's fine.
by that time, we should hopefully have something that we can, and then we'll, if everyone's good with that, then we'll integrate it into the following board meeting. All right.
I'm sorry, can I just piggyback on this topic?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because since we're talking about how procedures for these meetings, I've noticed that a lot of our meetings, the new members go straight to vote and like minimize discussion sometimes, and that's something I've been concerned about.
And that actually is, I was looking, is explicitly prohibited by Robert's rules. So if that's something that we need to address.
Yeah, but it goes along with what Samir is getting to, like, letting people talk and flesh out their concerns. It's just as important as respecting.
Yeah, and I mean, I go back to Renee's statement because I think it is very sort of comprehensive, and it's about hearing it from everyone, hearing everyone's perspective. And I think that's goes to the same point that you're talking about. And so, I mean, I have no issue with that being read in some full, like the committee ones don't need to be the same as the full board ones, but having a statement like that at every meeting, I don't think.
And this is why the team building is so important, right? Because that's an appropriate forum to talk about it. And we used to have the team building, but we've learned.
We're gonna. Charles.
Sorry, Chair, I do apologize. I was just thinking, if we can think about decorum, how we treat people, I think the public should treat us with respect also, because don't forget, we had people attack our former colleague, Craig Susskind, very personally at a few full board meetings ago, and just today criticizing Renee's way of chairing meetings. So I feel like if we're going to have if we're going to have standards of decorum, I think we really got to rein in the public commenters too, that it's great hearing from them, and they should stick to the actual topic and not have personal attacks on individual board members. Thank you.
Maybe it's a question from Marisa, but what are our limits on what we can stop members of the public from saying? I assume there is some limit, First Amendment wise, on like what we
I
can
mean,
tell
I will
them
mute
to.
them if they start cursing, but otherwise, they can sort of say.
They can basically.
They have 2 minutes.
Like, except
You're talking about.
What they want to say.
Could be applicable.
Even then, I would push the envelope on Tristan, frankly.
Well, hopefully that's not an issue that we have to deal with going forward, but if it is, we will address it again. That is the end of that one. Any new business? Yes.
Really quick.
Yeah.
Okay, so. Sorry. So, something came up regarding a new proposed cannabis law that we wanted to write a letter for.
Right.
So we have not written a resolution for stating our opinion regarding enforcement, but I think in general in discussions, we have always said, enforcement is really important in supporting like legal cannabis businesses. So what
What's
do you
the
think is the best
timeline? When
way?
is the letter needed?
So it is needed by July 31st. There are no additional meetings after the full board meeting is Thursday.
The letter is not written, I assume, so you cannot get on the full board on Thursday.
You can write it real fast.
Dennis, if I could comment.
Yes, please.
So we had the public hearing just yesterday, and we do have a resolution in place that affirms that we are allowed to make comments regarding ongoing and upcoming legislation, because this stuff is all new. So this is a new, it's a new, public hearing, and that in our original resolution, we said that we would be empowered to make comments. And so we should, I would submit the letter, but it's not gonna be by tomorrow for full board. But the full board has affirmed.
In line with.
Yes,
So-
thank you.
So then I say,
And it's less than 4 years old.
Great. So then I would say, let's just to be safe, let's circulate that to the executive committee, just, so just to get a broader set of eyes to weigh in on it. But it sounds like it's probably going to be fairly innocuous and fairly in line with our prior positions. So I don't anticipate any concerns, but let's just be safe rather than sorry. And it goes in line with the policy I talked about of, timing being most critical thing to make sure our voice is.
The only thing I would say is this whole thing is so new, right? Like when the cannabis task force started, it wasn't generally acknowledged that the whole process of regulating cannabis was a disaster. So I will see, I'm sure Catherine's letter will reflect the urgency. So it's so urgent that I think that it would be really helpful if it came out under the imprimatur of the full board as soon as possible. But, that's subject to your discretion, Brad, and, the rest of the executive committee.
Yeah, I mean, to go back to the conversation before, I think if it's not gonna get voted on by the full board, I think it should be coming from either the task force or the SOC committee, and it should not be coming from the full board. Yeah, unless it's completely in line with other things we've already supported.
Yeah, I think we'll have to see the letter and the resolution that like Captain is referencing, just to sort of see if those two are in alignment, and if they're not, then we'll talk about, where the letter comes from.
It's the exact meeting again.
Can't wait. Yeah, wanna do one tomorrow?
Goal is get it by Thursday or no?
So the goal, so there,
Okay.
because we're not doing it in the full board, you can take your time with a letter.
Get him a list.